Oh, and even Santa making an appearance.
There's a special Christmas menu at the Chinese restaurant.
Ah, really? I guess we all know how you got so fat. The cat's out of the bag, Santa. Now, even though I have covered this game in a regular episode, there were a few more glitches that would be really cool to show off for Glitchmas. If you remember the episode, you'll have seen a glitch where you could run above the ground in Deguita. This is performed by walking down the steps, letting go of the D-pad here, then tapping left 3 times, walking 4 steps back up the stairs, tapping the right trigger, turning around, and then running away from the stairs. Ryo will now be running in the air. Now, besides the obvious visual comedy of this glitch, this did have an actual use. You could then use this glitch to skip the whole of Disc 1 by clipping out of bounds. Standing above a small shelf outside the bakery, speak to this guy and you'll drop to the ground. Then by alternating left and right on the D-pad, you're able to clip through the shop front. Running all the way around the town while out of bounds means you could get to the otherwise inaccessible bus stop, which you'd have to complete Disc 1 to reach. You could then just jump on the bus and skip all of the first disc. Well, here's another way to do the running on air glitch, but this time it's in Sakuragaoka, and it's actually really easy. You need to find this area where the street comes to a dead end. You'll see this fence at the top of the small hill on the left-hand side. Here we need to get Ryo in a certain position, where his left arm is against the fence and his feet are at 2 different heights. It can be a bit fiddly, but basically get Ryo looking exactly like this and you'll get the glitch. With this set up, now we just have to wait for the day to night transition cutscene that happens at 7 PM. The cutscene will play as normal, and then when the gameplay resumes, the camera will zip across the entire area to catch up with Ryo, who is now way up in the air. During the day-to-night transition, the game seems to change Ryo's X-coordinate whilst maintaining his Y-coordinate, and this means he's placed at the height he was, but just in a different place. You're able to explore the area, only now you're 10 foot in the air. There are some restrictions, however. For instance, the collision for walls and objects that exist on the ground extend upwards, although you can go through some buildings. You can even begin training while in the air, which is cool, if not a bit impractical. I really love this glitch. Shenmue is actually a really stable game, so major glitches in a game like this fascinate me. Of course, when you leave the area, Ryo will be put back on the ground where he belongs. Another really interesting glitch lets you get out of bounds at the start of Disc 2. During the search for the real warehouse number 8, instead of avoiding the guards, turn around and head back to the small porter cabin at the entrance to the old warehouse district. Stand in front of the blue sign by the gate, and now you need to move left and right repeatedly. Exactly like the clip earlier through the bakery, Ryo is now able to go right through this wall. You'll now be inside the cabin, which is pretty interesting, I guess, but it gets better. Nothing beyond this wall is solid, and so you're able to run around this whole area relatively unrestricted. There are some invisible solid walls, however, which would prevent you from getting out of bounds if you were on the other side of them. Also, the guards apparently aren't able to spot you like this either. This glitch has the usual graphical effects you see in many games when you're out of bounds, where sections of the world pop in and out depending on where the game thinks you are and what should be seen to save memory. The funny thing is, you can still find warehouse number 8, only you'd actually be inside of it, or at least the model of it anyway. Opening the door to warehouse number 8 loads the interior and thus ends the glitch. And now, for my favorite glitch in the game. Can you spot something wrong with this picture? This is called the twisted neck glitch, and for obvious reasons. It's performed by walking next to an NPC, and then, as you see another NPC coming towards you, press the L trigger and lock onto the NPC next to you. Now hold the control stick upwards to keep the camera locked onto them for as long as possible. The A button prompt in the right-hand corner will disappear briefly and then reappear. Now press the A button and this will cause Ryo to speak with the NPC from a distance in an unintentional way. Usually, the NPC won't actually respond vocally and then break away from conversation. This will cause the game to think Ryo is still in a conversation and his head will be locked onto the NPC. When you run by them, his head will be awkwardly turned towards them, creating this hilarious visual glitch. But it only gets better when you go to a vending machine with this glitch active. Now, I'm gonna let this whole thing play out because every inch of it makes me both terrified and roll around with laughter. Now, bear in mind, during this whole program sequence, the game still thinks Ryo is in a conversation, and this takes priority over the vending machine animation. Oh yeah, get that cola nearer to that ear. No, that wasn't enough. I need the whole drink in there, all of the Jet Cola in the air. This can in the trash throw, he doesn't even care. He knows it's going in. Is she still there? She's still looking at me, right? Watch me. Watch me run. Eventually, the glitch will iron itself out, but not until I've died with laughter. When he opens that can, that sound effect is just perfect. It has to be said, it's a pretty tricky glitch to get, and I had the game freeze on me a few times trying to get it to work. If the NPC goes too far away from Rio, the game will just get confused, and this will often result in them looking blankly at you, or you looking longingly at them. You can pause the game, but that's it. The game's frozen. Nothing left to do but reset. In one attempt, the guy just disappeared, and Rio was just left there standing all alone. This is one of the best glitches in any game for sure. But that look over Rio's shoulder when you begin running away, that's the stuff of nightmares. Well, that was terrifying. I think I need to lie down in a dark room. And if you like this episode, hit that like button, share it with everyone you know and love, but most importantly, please subscribe if you want to see more from the series. Wow. Head over to the Facebook page for the show. I post updates and sneak
Hi guys, so I really enjoyed doing the 15 cancelled Dreamcast games, so I thought I'd have a look at one of Sega's other consoles, the Sega Saturn, which is a console that I never had back in the day, but one that I'm really enjoying playing now, and really good to explore the library, especially the Japanese library there. Lots of games that I never got to experience as a kid. Now there are numerous games that never came to the system, same as the Dreamcast, and I've picked 15 here to show you. So here are 15 cancelled Sega Saturn games. Witchwood was to be an action-adventure game from Team 17, which was in development from 1994 to 1996. Originally intended for the Amiga and PC, in 1995 the project moved to PC, PlayStation, Saturn and Jaguar. Witchwood was similar in style to the top-down 2D Zelda games, and followed the journey of a young man on a quest to destroy an evil witch. During its development, Team 17 were also working on a similar action-adventure called Sperris. When this was released on Amiga in 1996, its poor sales may have prompted Team 17 to cancel Witchwood, although the real reason for the game's cancellation is uncertain. A playable demo of Witchwood was leaked online several years ago. The first of 3 cancelled Sonic games on this list, Sonic Saturn was in development at the same time as the cancelled Sonic Extreme during 1995 and 96. Sonic Saturn, presumably a working title, was to use 3D models rather than the 2D sprites of its predecessors, using an interesting 3D engine dubbed the Sonic Saturn engine. It was never officially announced, so we can only assume that it didn't progress very far before cancellation. A prototype was created by the guy who created Sonic 2 Special Stages, but Yuji Naka didn't like it, so the Sonic Saturn engine was never used to develop a Sonic game on Saturn. Based on the 1950s novel and film The Incredible Shrinking Man, The Incredible Shrinking character was an action-adventure game in development in 1996 by Cyberdreams on PC, PlayStation and Saturn. The player would control a private investigator who, after visiting the castle of mad scientist Dr. Warren Franklin, is shrunk to a minuscule size by the Doctor's shrink ray. The player would shrink in size progressively each level, making obstacles of household objects and threats of small animals like spiders and ants. Although it was announced in magazines and even a preview video emerged, the Incredible Shrinking character was never finished because Cyberdreams went under. Roll Cage, not to be confused with the futuristic racer of the same name from Psygnosis, was a cancelled racing game being developed by Team 17 for the PlayStation 3DO and Saturn. Very little info is available on this game, but it looks like it was intended to be a blend of stunt car and stock car racing with realistic cars and tracks. All that seems to be online is a video from a magazine cover disc and a few screenshots in a separate magazine. I have no idea why it was cancelled, but Roll Cage never made it to any platform. Terminus is a cancelled action-adventure third-person shooter developed by Scavenger Inc. for the Saturn, PlayStation and PC in 1996. Scavenger claimed in press releases that Terminus would give Tomb Raider a run for its money. Terminus died along with several other ongoing projects. The team working on the game moved to Shiny Entertainment, and Terminus eventually morphed into Messiah on PC. Split Realities was a 2D side-scrolling action game by Funcom in development for the Saturn and PlayStation. All that exists is some screenshots of the game which show an immediate resemblance to Delphine Software's Flashback. Rumoured to blend side-scrolling beat-em-up and action platforming elements, I think it looks really interesting for a game with so little on show. It was cancelled due to developmental issues, but lead artist Didrik Tollefsen was keen to take the core concept of Split Realities and build a new game around it. The end result was 1999's point-and-click adventure The Longest Journey, which was a far cry from the original game's idea, but preserved elements of it. As mentioned earlier, Sonic X-treme was in development at the same time as Sonic Saturn, and was to be the first fully 3D Sonic game, and the first entry in the Sonic series on the Saturn. Originally conceived as a 2D entry in the series for the Mega Drive, development moved to the Saturn, but was fraught with developmental issues. The gameplay style and plot were changed several times before settling on a fully 3D platform game, evident from the differing demos available, and the team had problems acquiring a suitable engine. A visit from Sega of Japan in 1996 also didn't help, as they disliked the engine's performance on the Saturn. Eventually, when the project's two lead developers fell ill, the game was cancelled. The failure of Sonic X-treme is said to be a large contributing factor in the Saturn's failure, and many have subsequently pondered on whether the console's success would have been very different had Sonic X-treme been a success. Before making history on the Saturn's successor, the Dreamcast, Yu Suzuki's epic adventure Shenmue was intended for release on the Saturn. Originally conceived as a Virtua Fighter RPG starring Akira, the project was cancelled on Saturn due to the Dreamcast release and the amount of time it would need for completion. Shenmue would have been a beast on Saturn, taking up over 8 CDs, and an impressive demo exists showing it running on the console. Scud Race, known as Sega Super GT in North America, is a 1996 arcade racer and the first game to use Sega's Model 3 hardware. Scud Race is sadly an arcade exclusive, but a port was originally heading to the Saturn. It eventually moved to the Dreamcast, and a tech demo emerged of it running on the console, but this too was cancelled. What a pity, as Scud Race would have been well suited to either console. Hyper Blade was a violent, futuristic sports game, released on Windows 95 in 1996, and was also intended for the PlayStation and Saturn, but both ports were cancelled not long before release. Gameplay takes place in an elliptical dome, which is full of dangerous hazards. Players must throw an object called a rock into a small goal at either end of the dome. I'm not sure why the two console ports were axed, but from the looks of it, it's not that huge of a loss. I mean, it's no Speedball 2. Sonic the Fighters, also called Sonic Championship in European and North American arcades, was a 1996 arcade fighting game for Sega's Model 2 arcade system, developed by AM2. The game started its life when one of AM2's character designers decided to put Sonic and Tails into fighting Vipers, and Yu Suzuki saw it and decided to pitch the idea. Yuji Naka, with some encouragement, liked the idea and requested that the team design some new Sonic characters for the game. Sonic the Fighters uses similar gameplay mechanics to those in the Fighting Vipers and Virtua Fighter games, and has a selection of Sonic characters from which to choose. Players either fight each other or progress through arcade mode, eventually facing off against Metal Sonic and then Robotnik. A Saturn port was planned from day one, intended for a 1997 release, but for whatever reason never happened. Two of its characters, Bean the Dynamite and Bark the Polar Bear, later appeared on Saturn in 97's Fighters Megamix. Before it became Fighting Force, Core Design pitched the game to Sega as Streets of Rage 4. Initially intended as a Saturn exclusive, Core decided that it would be a better strategy to make it a multi-platform game, and as a result Sega demanded that the Streets of Rage license be removed. Renamed Fighting Force, the game was headed to PlayStation, Windows and Saturn. The first two of which saw release in 1997, but the Saturn version never appeared, despite rumours that it was completed. The reason behind this is said to be over the publishing, with Core looking to Eidos at first, and then Sega of Europe for the Saturn version. Eidos handled the successful PlayStation and PC versions, but for some reason the game never came to Saturn. A prototype of the Saturn version of Fighting Force was uploaded in 2008 by DRX. Monster Maker Holy Dagger was a planned sequel to NEC's Monster Maker on the PC Engine CD, which ended on a cliffhanger. A strategy RPG, Monster Maker Holy Dagger experienced some production delays, similar to its predecessor, and was eventually cancelled due to the project taking too long to complete with the Saturn nearing the end of its lifespan. Rather than move the project to another platform, NEC decided to cancel the game. All that I could find was some screenshots from a Japanese Saturn magazine, but they do look gorgeous, so it's a shame that this never saw release. Major Damage was being developed for the Saturn by Capcom, and was a side-scrolling action game which used 3D backgrounds with pre-rendered sprites, in the way pioneered by Rare's Donkey Kong Country, a resemblance to which is evident from the screenshots. Prototypes of the game in its early development stages have been leaked online, showing its run-and-gun style of gameplay. It was eventually cancelled on Saturn, again due to Sega dropping support for the console, but as the game was almost completed, Capcom took Major Damage to Sony for a potential PlayStation release, but it was rejected. HMS Carnage, later renamed Dreadnought, was to be a Victorian steampunk strategy shooter set on Mars, with gameplay elements similar to Warhawk on PS3, with the player controlling various vehicles to complete missions. The game was in development for a whopping 3 years at Ocean Software, but surprisingly all that seems to exist is a short demo and some screenshots. Apparently, the PlayStation and Saturn ports of the game would have been rather different to the PC version, as they were planned much later on, as Ocean's main focus was on the PC version, so the console ports would have been more action oriented. In 1998, Infogrames bought Ocean, and the project was deemed to be too costly to finish, and so HMS Carnage, aka Dreadnought, was cancelled. So those were 15 of the many cancelled Sega Saturn games. Did I exclude any that you were particularly excited for? Let me know in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.
Gonna smoke me a fatty brisket. I got my barbecue shoes on.
Welcome to BarbecuePitBoys.com. Today we're grilling up some beer steamed cheeseburgers at the pit, and it's real easy to do. We got the steam, so why not make some beer steamed cheeseburgers? Alright, for this recipe, there's sauerkraut, yellow mustard, shredded cheese, Acme beer, of course. He's got some ground chuck or ground beef, cheese, onion, some SPG, some sauce, and he's got some rolls. Alright, let's see what he's going to do here. These are beer steamed. He's got his cast iron pan there. Alright, I get it. He's going to use that as a steamer. And here he's got some beef. Alright, you better go to the cupboard now and get your peanut butter, man, because this is gonna be good, no doubt about it. Looks like about pound of beef. He's bringing it down to 2 half-pounders, of course. Do your math. He's hitting it with some SPG. You want to season your burger, of course. At least use some salt and pepper. And here he's adding some shredded cheese. Oh yeah. This is the cheeseburger part, I think. And he's mixing it well. Now what the cheese is doing is adding additional fat and creaminess in a way, right? It'll make that burger taste real good, no doubt about it, right? Get some of that cheese in the middle of that. Working it in. All right, that's easy enough. Now, if you've never had a beer steamed cheeseburger in your life, you better check it out. It's gonna go good. Pretty much any beer you're drinking, and I see he's got some Acme beer there. Always use Acme beer. Now he's got these little cast iron plates. He's formed a burger into, like I said, half-pound patties there.
いいねも流れるから海外のコメントはニコルくんついてるのかと思う。イカ略。
ビール蒸しチーズバーガー。
このチャンネルにソーセージのソーセージ出し料理あるけど見る？
Ah, clever. Drops it in that cast iron pan. Puts the cover on. And we're steaming it while he's waiting it for it to steam up. Slicing some onions, heating up those rolls, right, to make them fresh. Oh man, look at that. Oh, you kidding me? Now there's some very, very famous steamed cheeseburgers made here in the country. You can check it out online, but I'm telling you, they're not going to be as good as this because we're using beer, right? It's got one cook, throwing another in. Oh yeah. And he's going to finish it off. Add some nice sear texture to the outside, right? Most steamed cheeseburgers are just that. They don't take the time to sear up the outside before serving. Of course, you want to do that. Oh, it's getting steamy. That's a beautiful island there, Formosa. All right. Does a quick flip. I'm sure you know all about this, but kind of like watching this while I'm eating my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. All right, now he's got both sides seared nicely, and he's putting a slice of cheese on there. All right, one is done. Man. The rolls are nicely toasted. Now he's going to set these up. He's got some yellow mustard. Get that. We're gonna be eating good tonight, Martha. Where the hell are you? Give us a call. We'll send you some taxi cab fare, right? Now he's got some of our Pit Boys hot sauce, and this will get your attention. Use your favorite hot sauce if you can't get ours, right? Our bold and spicy is real good. Or you can use our sweet if you don't like the heat. Now, on goes that steamed cheeseburger. Wow, man. Are you getting hungry or what?
2000 kilocalories くらいありそう。
Nice slices of sweet onion. And here goes some sauerkraut. And that balances off that mustard, I'd say.
吉田ソースうまいよ。
There's a nice combination of flavors going on here, I'm telling you.
ベーコンが
Now
な
you're
いだ
going
と
to find the exact recipe and the ingredients, the whole 9 yards by going to our website, barbecuepitboys.com. And I think this is where he's going to eat it in front of us. Oh no, hold it. He's going to show us what it looks like on the inside.
高いな。
Most burger joints won't show you that 'cause they can't find the meat. Oh man, Take a look at that.
アメリカンヒゲ麺。
Oh,
いい高さだ。
cheese dripping out. Oh, this is where he eats it in front of us. And he's not apologizing, trust me. Now, we'd really appreciate your support by following us or subscribing to our channel. And we've got over 15,000 chapters in over 100 countries now, and we'd sure as hell love to have you join us. So the next time you're looking for a recipe for your pit, check out barbecuepitboys.com.
ちゃんとワンコがおるな。うまそう味。
ワン、ワンワン。ワンワンを。
気に入ってもらえたかな。ね。悪名ブランド。
Although I'd put Nintendo's Game Boy on the throne as king of my childhood handhelds, I also had a Sega Game Gear as a kid and absolutely loved it. Yeah, so the battery life was poor and the game library was tiny in comparison, but it...
ね、ね、ね。メガドライブ。
Although I'd put Nintendo's Game Boy on the throne as king of my childhood handhelds, I also had a Sega Game Gear as a kid and absolutely loved it. Yeah, so the battery life was poor and the game library was tiny in comparison, but it was Sega and it was colour. Despite being known for Master System ports, the Game Gear actually had a lot of exclusives, some of which seem to rarely get mentioned. So here are 13 Game Gear exclusives that I think are worth your time.
Sega.
Arena, known as Arena Maze of Death in North America, was released in North America and Europe very late on in the Game Gear's life in 1996, and so passed many people by. The developers had a version working on the Master System as well, but it didn't see release, and so became a Game Gear exclusive. The plot, which actually reminds me of the Firefly film Serenity, is set in 2026 and revolves around your character navigating several maze-like areas in an attempt to prevent a television broadcaster from controlling the population by means of brainwashing. You must broadcast evidence of their plans over the TV channels in the hope that it will instigate an uprising. Arena is an isometric action game and has pretty impressive graphics for the Game Gear. There's a melee attack on one button and the other fires whichever weapon you have equipped. Don't expect to be wowed by Arena, but its mix of action and exploration is good fun, and it's definitely one for Game Gear enthusiasts to check out. Axe Battler: A Legend of Golden Axe was released in all regions in 1991 and is an action RPG spin-off of the Golden Axe series. You play as the titular Axe Battler, the male warrior from the main series, and he's once again setting off on a quest to prevent Death Adder from using the legendary Golden Axe to destroy the world. Axe Battler has frequently been compared to Zelda 2 on the NES, and its gameplay combines top-down exploration with side-scrolling action platformer segments, the latter of which trigger when enemies are encountered. Not the best RPG on the system by any means, but one definitely worth grabbing for Game Gear owning RPG fans, or those with an interest in Golden Axe lore. Coca-Cola Kid is a Japanese exclusive side-scrolling adventure game released in 1994. Starring Japan's 90s Coca-Cola mascot, the titular Coca-Cola Kid, the game was also released as a pack-in title with a limited edition Coca-Cola Game Gear console. The Kid runs through the levels on the time limit, attacking enemies and destroying obstacles with kicks. He can also hang on to walls, allowing him to jump from wall to wall to gain access to higher spaces. Pretty standard platform type gameplay, but it's fun, and with some well presented bosses and has nice graphics too. A shame it never saw a Western release. Factory Panic was released in 1991 in Japan and Europe, and it didn't come to North America, although Tectoy did bring it to Brazil. Apparently the original Japanese release starred Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet Union's president at the time, for those not old enough to remember, but in the European version it's just a generic boy. He's working in a factory and must deliver certain items to their respective people who are waiting at the end of a series of conveyor belts. Gameplay is, in theory, simple puzzle fare, with the boy manipulating switches and links, with the aim being to ensure that the correct item goes to the relevant person. In practice, it can be quite challenging, with quick thinking often being required. As a player progresses to harder levels, security guards must also be avoided, and hazardous items must be diverted away from the item recipients, making the game even more of a challenge. This is a real gem on the system in my opinion, and it's very suited to a handheld, which is perhaps why it was exclusive to the Game Gear. It's also pretty inexpensive, so grab yourself a cart on eBay. The GG Shinobi 2, The Silent Fury, was released in all regions in 1992. The player controls Ninja Joe Masashi on a mission to find 5 crystals. The first 4 levels can be played in any order, and defeating the boss will grant you access to one of Joe's ninja pals, who have special abilities. The player can then access the other ninjas during the levels, and their abilities, like double jump and grapple, allow the player to access previously out of reach areas in which a crystal can be found. Once the 4 crystals have been found, the castle becomes accessible, in which the player can fight the Black Ninja to gain the 5th and final crystal. Gameplay is the kind of quality action platforming that you'd expect from a Shinobi game, but the added element of being able to switch to characters with special abilities adds a little something extra. And the music's awesome. This really is one of the must-haves for the Game Gear. Mega Man was released in 1995, so quite late in the system's life, but solely in North America. As you've probably guessed as it's on this list, Mega Man on the Game Gear isn't a port, but its own game, although it does borrow elements from Mega Man 4 and 5 on the NES, and Dr. Wily's Fortress is lifted from Quick Man stage in Mega Man 2. Die-hard Mega Man fans will probably find this game a bit slower than the NES's Mega Man games, but it's a decent entry in the series nonetheless. Definitely worth a look. Ninja Gaiden was released in all regions in 1991 and is an action platformer in the popular Ninja Gaiden series. This game is great fun and actually looks more like a Strider game than a game in the Ninja Gaiden series. The buttons are jump and attack, but pressing down and attack will use items collected, like throwing shuriken. It's much easier than you'd usually expect from a Ninja Gaiden game, but that suits me just fine, although more accomplished players may be left hungry for more of a challenge. Popils, known in Europe as Popils the Blockbusting Challenge, and in Japan as Magical Puzzle Popils, is a platform puzzle game released in 1991 in Japan and 1992 in Europe and North America. Each level contains a short puzzle in which the player character, a boy, must reach the princess through the manipulation of blocks and ladders. A simple premise indeed, but some of the puzzles can be really tricky. Popils contains 100 levels in total, but also has a level editor in which the player can create their own puzzles, so the game has even more replay value. Much like Factory Panic, this sort of game is really suited to a handheld system, and it's really addictive, so Popils comes highly recommended. Sonic the Hedgehog Triple Trouble, released in Japan as Sonic and Tails 2, is the sequel to Sonic Chaos and was released in all regions in 1994. The player can play as either Sonic or Tails, with each having a unique ability. Sonic can perform his strike dash from Sonic CD by holding up and jump, allowing him to gain speed from a standing start, much like the spin dash, and Tails has the ability to fly. Most of the Game Gear's Sonic games were Master System ports, so Triple Trouble is bigger than the system's previous Sonic games, and is more similar to those on the Mega Drive, but as a result it can suffer from slowdown in places. I really like this game despite some complaints that it's too easy, although I do find the movement to be a bit floaty, and I'd recommend it to any Game Gear owning Sonic fans. Defenders of Oasis is one of the best RPGs to come to the Game Gear in the West, and was released in all regions in 1992. The story is an Alibaba Sinbad type Arabian affair, whose plot I won't go into as it's bloody confusing, but blah blah blah, good versus evil, yada yada. The main player character is the prince of the game world, and along the journey more characters can be enlisted: the genie of the lamp, a boy called Salim, and a thief called Agmar. Gameplay follows the usual JRPG format, with the player traversing a 2.5D world and switching to turn-based combat when enemies are encountered. I was never the biggest fan of turn-based RPGs like this, but if you are, then I'd thoroughly recommend grabbing this, and back in 1992 you were getting a lot of bang for your buck with Defenders of Oasis. Crystal Warriors came to the Game Gear in 1991 in Japan and 1992 in Europe and North America. It's a turn-based strategy game which has similar gameplay elements to games like Shining Force and Fire Emblem. There are 16 levels in which the player commands a party of up to 9 who must battle their way across a map to defeat an enemy party protecting a castle. Battles are turn-based and attacks consist of melee attacks, spells and monsters, and defeated monsters can be tamed and then used strategically in future battles. Units belong to one of 4 elemental groups: Earth, Wind, Fire and Water, with each having advantages over enemies of a particular elemental type. The plot is pretty thin. Evil Jin has stolen 3 of the 4 elemental crystals used to keep peace in the realm, and the sorceress princess Iris must battle to retrieve them. The only plot points occur at the start and end of the game, so it's largely irrelevant anyway. Another game that offered a lot for the price of entry, Crystal Warriors offers a good challenge and some replay value as you can play through the game again with different party members or using a different strategy. I'd recommend this to anyone wanting a Game Gear game with a good strategy element, as there aren't many, or to any fans of games like Fire Emblem or even Pokemon. Another genre that's poorly represented on the Game Gear is shooters. GG Aleste was released only in Japan in 1991, and as with many shooters on Sega systems, it's a crying shame that it never made it to Western shores. It's a vertical shooter that scrolls diagonally, although I do find the scrolling to be a bit jerky, although this really isn't an issue when it's all kicking off on screen, as you don't really have time to pay attention to it. The fire button fires both your normal shot and one of several special shots that can be collected in the form of power-ups, and the fire button can be held down for rapid fire. The special weapons look great as they fill up the screen, my favourite being blue rings that act as homing missiles, as they make the game, especially the bosses, so much easier. GG Aleste has a great pace and some awesome music, and the visuals are pretty decent for a Game Gear title too. I'd recommend this to anyone wanting a game that's good for a quick blast, but it's really a no-brainer for any fans of vertical shooters. Last but not least is Ronald McDonald in Magical World, which was released only in Japan in 1994. Interestingly though, it will translate into English if played on a European or American Game Gear, perhaps hinting at a planned Western release. Although an entirely different game, it does have many similarities to 1993's platformer McDonald's Treasureland Adventure on the Mega Drive, and did use some of Treasure's assets despite being developed by Sims. There are 4 themed areas, each containing 4 levels, with a boss at the end of each area. Ronald is equipped with an umbrella, which both acts as a weapon and allows him to glide. There are also 2 mini-games, one a picture-matching puzzle, and one where Ronald collects items on a plate in a way reminiscent of Burger Time. Gameplay is fun and can be quite a challenge too, but offers a password save system to help you along. It really is a crime that this game never left Japan, as it's arguably the best platformer on the Game Gear. Everything is spot on. The graphics are top notch considering the hardware, and the soundtrack, which is partly borrowed from Treasure's Mega Drive game, is excellent. Definitely worth importing. So those are my 13 most recommended Game Gear exclusives. Let me know in the comments if there are any other exclusives on the system that you think should have made the list. I've left a link to a site where you can play some of these games in your browser, so check that out if buying an actual cart copy of any of the games is beyond your means, or if you simply want to try before you buy. Thanks for watching!
In
the early 90s, the video game industry was obsessed.
キリタンの放送 URL 悪。きりたんこにそういや知らないっすね。左下の品性を疑うわ。
くそ。ゲームギア持ってた友達が羨ましかったな。
Episode, but first a word about our sponsor, ExpressVPN. Just in case you didn't know, a VPN is a virtual private network. It's a service that encrypts your internet data and protects your online identity. There's an ExpressVPN program for your computer, an app for your mobile device, and a plugin for your browser. It's very easy to set up. Just download the program, open it up. There's a month with a massacre. And a massacre to thousands. PlayStation 2, GameCube, and original Xbox are duking it out, but let's not get into all that console wars shit right now. So anyway, Square Enix, which was still called Squaresoft at the time, is the RPG master. With the long-running success of their Final Fantasy series and hot off the release of Final Fantasy X, the company makes an announcement that at the time hit the world with shock and confusion. Enter Kingdom Hearts, an ambitious crossover between the Final Fantasy universe and Disney. Yeah, Disney. If you were to see screenshots of the game in magazines at the time, you'd think it was a joke, but it wasn't. In fact, it was a big success, and it was followed by Kingdom Hearts 2 in 2005. And since then, everybody's been waiting for the third game, but little did they know it wouldn't be out for 13 years. Now, I'll admit, I haven't played any of the games so far, but with all the hype surrounding it, and with the third game right around the corner, I was wondering, is it worth getting into? I mean, there's not that much to catch up with. There's only 3 games, right? Yeah. Well. Kingdom Hearts is a massive series with about 20 games altogether, containing sequels, prequels, remakes, HD remasters, and even concerts. If you think you can play just the main 3 games and know what's up, then oh, think again. The first game starts off simple enough. It tells the story of a boy named Sora who lives on the Destiny Islands with his friends. The group dreams of leaving the islands and exploring new worlds, but one night the islands are attacked by evil monsters called the Heartless. To battle the Heartless, Sora obtains the Key Blade. It's not really a blade so much as a big fucking key that you use to bash the ever-loving shit out of enemies with. Sora defeats the Heartless that attack their home, but the island is destroyed. And at the same time this is happening, Donald, Duck, and Goofy set out to find Mickey Mouse using a spaceship and end up landing in Traverse Town where they meet Sora and begin their quest to find their friends and stop the Heartless. It's a decent action RPG that stands up with Square's usual quality of games. The story can be kinda confusing, but makes sense within the confines of the universe it establishes. Then the second game comes out, and that's where it gets really nuts. It starts you off in Twilight Town as a new guy, Roxas and his friends. Well, that's fine, but what happened to Sora, Donald, and Goofy? These new characters are never mentioned anywhere in the first game, but all of a sudden they're the main characters? Sora, Donald, and Goofy don't even show up until about 2 hours into the game. So, what happened? Well, it turns out to get the full story, you have to play Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories on the Game Boy Advance before playing Kingdom Hearts 2. That's where Roxas gets introduced, and it also gives the story in between the first and second game. But come on, you can't just stick some new characters in the main sequel without any explanation or proper introduction. So now, you have to get a Game Boy Advance if you don't already have one and play through another game just so you can be up to speed on part 2. Okay, imagine if you're watching the Back to the Future trilogy. You finish the first one and can't wait to see what happens. Then the movie starts and it's just a bunch of new characters you've never seen before, and Doc and Marty finally show up 45 minutes into the damn movie. Then you find out you're supposed to listen to a book on tape before you watch it. I guess it's also like how you have to sit through an hour of the awful Star Wars holiday special just to see the introduction of Boba Fett. Geez, hopefully that's the last time I ever have to reference that unsalvageable waste of recording media. However, even if you do play it, Chain of Memories doesn't even explain who Roxas is. It just introduces him. Roxas is Sora's nobody. In Kingdom Hearts, when someone with a strong heart loses their heart, they create a nobody. So when Sora gave his heart to save Kairi in the first game, he created Roxas. Well, that's all well and good, but how about explain that shit? Most of the prequels and in-between games came out in 2008 and onward. That's 3 years after Kingdom Hearts 2 was released and 6 after the first. Oh, and the names. You want to get into the titles? Boy, did they use every possible naming convention under the sun. You have numbered games, games using the Greek alphabet, decimals, and even fractions. The game about Roxas is called, Look, that's the title. I can't even think of any sequels in general that use fractions. Maybe the Naked Gun movies, but off the top of my head, that's about it. And I don't even know if it's intended to be a fraction. After reducing it down, it should be called Kingdom Hearts 179 Days. Yeah, I know it's supposed to be 358 days between two characters, but seriously, the first time I saw this title, I didn't even know how to read it. Is it 358 over 2 days? Is it 358 halves days? No, the way it's supposed to be read is Kingdom Hearts 358 days over 2. Why not just call it Kingdom Hearts Roxas Story? Why all the convoluted cockamamie names? The one that really takes the cake for me, and get ready for this, is Kingdom Hearts 0.2 Birth by Sleep, a fragmentary passage. That's a paragraph! You have a decimal, a subtitle, and a tagline? Now that's a motherfucking title. So with that said, let's finally start tackling this timeline. It starts not with Kingdom Hearts 1, but with Kingdom Hearts Key, which was a Japan-only browser-based game explaining the Keyblade War. Nowadays, it isn't even playable, but the cutscenes were remastered in Kingdom Hearts HD 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue for the PS4. What a mouthful! This was followed by Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep for the PSP. Then, we have Kingdom Hearts 1, Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, Kingdom Hearts 358 Days over 2, and Kingdom Hearts 2. After that is where it starts getting really weird, or weirder. After 2, we get Kingdom Hearts Coded, which only came out on Japanese mobile phones. It was however later released as Kingdom Hearts Recoded on the Nintendo DS. After Coded came Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance, the first tongue twister sequel for the 3DS. And the last game before Kingdom Hearts 3 was Kingdom Hearts 0.2 Birth by Sleep, a fragmentary passage. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. That right there is everything you need to know for Kingdom Hearts 3. So if you were following from the beginning just to get the full story, you'd be spending hundreds of dollars, or maybe even thousands between every game and console you need, you know, just to see Mickey, Donald, Goofy, and some anime kids beat the shit out of people with keys. Not to mention, there was a concert in 2017 and 2018 with additional plot points. But the only way you're going to see that now is if you build yourself a time machine. So on top of the $1,000 you're spending on the games, you're also going to have to spend millions to obtain plutonium to power a flux capacitor. Oh, then again, it's on YouTube. Luckily, nowadays, there's a ton of Kingdom Hearts compilations you can get that pack multiple games into one. There's almost as many remakes and remasters as there are actual games in the series. You have Kingdom Hearts HD 1.5 Remix, Kingdom Hearts HD 2.5 Remix, Kingdom Hearts HD 2.8 Remix, Final Chapter Prologue, Kingdom Hearts HD 1.5 plus 2.5 Remix, and lastly, Kingdom Hearts, The Story So Far. What a convenient title. The Story So Far packs in everything you need to know the full story before Kingdom Hearts 3 drops. and you don't need to understand complex mathematics or the Greek alphabet to play it. With all the shit packed in well after the first and second game, it makes me think they hadn't planned any of this. The first game is pretty straightforward. You travel to different Disney worlds to stop the Heartless and try to find your friends. The plethora of side stories and prequels just makes me feel like they were desperately trying to keep the hype train running until the third game finally came out. This series did essentially span 3 console generations, so I can understand that they wanted to give the fan base something to do in the meantime. But I just wonder if they had this entire story planned or were just padding it out to keep the interest going. So for someone who's just now looking to play these games for the first time, I'm kinda intimidated. Between all the entries in the series, you're looking at over 100 hours of gameplay, and that's without even counting Kingdom Hearts 3. Well gee, add that to the whole list of games in general that I'm trying to play. It's gonna be another 13 years to do that. I guess though, by that time, the third game will be old enough to do a proper Angry Nerd review. But these games so far are pretty decent. They provide a nice amount of playtime for your money, and the worlds are diverse and interesting. While the Disney stuff is kinda weird, it never feels out of place in the game's universe. Also, now with Disney owning Star Wars and the Marvel universes, it'll be cool battling alongside Jedi and Avengers. Will that ever happen? Maybe, maybe not. But maybe when Kingdom Hearts 4 drops in 2030. Then we'll finally be able to see Sora, Mickey, Donald, and Goofy team up with Han Solo, Luke, and Iron Man. Or not. But until then, who knows how many prequels and spin-offs and side stories and 4K remasters, remakes, reboots, and requels we'll see. Only time will tell.
みたいですね。
あかりちゃんペロペロもみもみなでなで。
赤ニュートンリングでピンチになった。
これも、えな。
わかんねえな。
面白そう。
クロスオーバーし、ね。くそ。誰が真ん中になるかで。寝そう。
赤、きりたんも。
おっす、おっす。それまで救い身があるかどうか。
Obsessed with bits.
これ以上スター・ウォーズを声だめの底に沈めるのはやめろ。黒板イラストスコ。あかりちゃん、お茶どうぞ、玉露。
スター・ウォーズは、もう、敵側にパロディキャラいるからな。
The average consumer didn't understand what a bit actually was, but they did know one thing. The more bits, the better. And video game companies used this to their advantage with marketing. Sega and Nintendo battled for the top spot in the market with their 16-bit console, the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. But with success came pressure. To stay ahead of the curve, they needed to come up with the next big thing. Pressure heated up in 1993 when Atari released their 64-bit console, the Jaguar. In their advertisements, Atari challenged customers to do the math.
Let's review the numbers. Sega Genesis is 16-bit.
バンダイはどこともくっつかなそう。紹介放送好き。
It was an enticement to consumers and a dig at their competition. The system ultimately didn't sell well, but in terms of sheer power, Atari's 64-bit system had Sega and Nintendo's 16-bit systems beat. Atari's powerful new console sent a strong message. But Atari wasn't the only company making waves. The 3DO was a 32-bit console released in late 1993, and was even named Time Magazine's 1993 Product of the Year. As 1994 wore on, there was a lot of buzz about Sony's upcoming console.
Although I put Nintendo's Game Boy on the throne as
In the early 90s, the video game industry was obsessed with bits.
Although I'd put Nintendo's
In the early 90s, the video game industry was obsessed with bits.
まっとうな手段でプラネシアが 100% になった世界か。
Today's lesson.
キリタンの糖尿刻々。ねね。ねね。
赤、カメオの本体に糖尿。
The average consumer didn't understand what a bit actually was, but they did know one thing. The more bits, the better. And video game companies used this challenge competition. The system ultimately didn't sell well, but in terms of sheer power, Atari's 64-bit system had Sega and Nintendo's 16-bit systems beat. Atari's powerful new console sent a strong message, but Atari wasn't the only company making waves. The 3DO was a 32-bit console released in late 1993, and was even named Time Magazine's 1993 Product of the Year. As 1994 wore on, there was a lot of buzz about Sony's upcoming console. Sega in particular felt the heat. They knew that to maintain their hard-fought spot as the scrappy, edgy competitor to Nintendo, they had to be cutting edge. But Sega of Japan and Sega of America had very different ideas on what their next move should be. Success played a big role in their divergent strategies. The Sega Genesis, known as the Mega Drive outside of North America, debuted in 1988 in Japan and didn't make a huge splash. By 1994, the Mega Drive felt like old news. Sega of Japan was ready to move on. But in America, the Genesis was in the midst of a rebirth. In the early 90s, newly hired Sega of America president Tom Kalinske gave Nintendo a run for its money when he called for an aggressive anti-Nintendo marketing campaign, slashed the price of the Genesis, and packaged the console with Sonic the Hedgehog. The 16-bit Genesis wasn't exactly cutting-edge technology, but it was fun, and gave Nintendo some serious competition. Sega's competing strategies came to clash at a January 1994 meeting during the Winter Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Executives from Sega of America met in a hotel room and conferenced in Sega CEO Hayao Nakayama. Nakayama wanted a 32-bit cartridge-based system, out in time for the 1994 holiday season. This would keep Sega ahead of the curve and help bridge the gap between the Genesis and future consoles. Nakayama's suggestion was essentially a 32-bit Sega Genesis. Sega of America president Tom Kalinske didn't like the idea. The Genesis was still selling well. There was no gap that needed to be bridged. Sega of America's head of research and development, Joe Miller, was also resistant. According to former Sega of America producer Michael Latham, Miller said, "Oh, that's just a horrible idea. If all you're going to do is enhance the system, you should make it an add-on. If it's a new system with legitimate new software, great. But if the only thing it does is double the colors..." Miller doesn't recall being quite that blunt. But after some debate, they agreed to make it an add-on. Sega of America would lead development, while Sega of Japan would provide any additional resources needed. The add-on would have to be ready by the 1994 holiday season. That gave Sega less than a year. It was a tall order, but not entirely out of the box. After all, Sega already had experience building add-ons for the Genesis. In 1989, they debuted the Power-Based Converter, which allowed players to play Master System games on the Genesis. A few years later, in 1992, they put out the Sega CD, which was an expensive but technologically advanced add-on that allowed users to play CD-based games. So, they moved forward. It was a difficult process. The team had just months to complete the product, which was codenamed Project Mars. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Sega of America, Sega of Japan was quietly developing their own 32-bit system, which would eventually become the Sega Saturn. According to Joe Miller, Project Mars had 3 initial prototypes. The first 2 were not much of an improvement over the Genesis, but the third prototype, suggested by Sega of Japan, contained 2 Hitachi SH2 32-bit processors, the same processors that would be used in the Saturn. It was a bit more complex than the Genesis hardware, but there was a strategy behind it. Sega of Japan argued that developers could learn to work with these new chips in preparation for Project Saturn, which was slowly coming to fruition. Sega's new plan was that the Saturn would be their next big console, while Project Mars would be a cheaper alternative for consumers who weren't quite ready to take the leap. Along with new processors came a more powerful VDP, more than 32,000 on-screen colors, 3D graphics support, enhanced sprite scaling and rotation, and 2 more digital sound channels. On paper, it was quite an upgrade for the Sega Genesis. The team initially called it the Genesis Super 32X, and eventually shortened it to 32X. By the summer of 1994, Sega showed off the 32X's near-final prototype at the Summer Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago. It went over fairly well. Sega pitched it as an inexpensive way for players to enjoy 32-bit technology, while also being able to play the enormous backlog of Genesis titles. They also promised a slew of new 32-bit games that would be available when the 32X launched that November. They also mentioned a few dozen companies who planned to develop games for the 32X. It was a who's who of video game makers: Acclaim, Activision, Capcom, Konami, and more. They finalized the design that fall. The end result of months of hard work was an add-on that inserts into the Genesis cartridge slot, transforming the 16-bit Genesis into a 32-bit system. Some developers jokingly called it the Sega Mushroom. Sega launched a $10 million ad campaign to promote the 32X. Sega was known for edgy, in-your-face ads, but these pushed the envelope even further by being surprisingly sexual. They highlighted the 32X's power and speed, and poked fun at how the add-on mounts the Genesis. For a little while, the 32X looked like it might just beat the odds. Ads and media coverage generated a lot of buzz.
You can even play your favorite Genesis and CD game. 32X makes the game way more intense, just like in the arcade.
But then, a bombshell. Sega of Japan announced that their new console, the Sega Saturn, would launch in Japan in November of 1994, the exact same time as the 32X launch. All of that momentum came to a screeching halt. With the Saturn launching in Japan, it would surely reach the rest of the world soon, which begged the question: what was the point of this 32-bit add-on? A few critics speculated that the 32X was a waste of money, a mere stopgap between the Genesis and the Saturn. Trip Hawkins, the founder of Electronic Arts, famously called it a Band-Aid. It didn't help matters when Sega threw a massive party for journalists that went horribly wrong. They flew reporters in from all over the country, put them up in a hotel in San Francisco, and threw a party where a rapper took the stage to praise the 32X. But the music was too loud, and the few 32X games that were on display looked so unimpressive that very few journalists actually played them. Despite these obstacles, Sega of America continued to market the system hard. In Sega Visions magazine, they made their case. There are high-end platforms that haven't been released yet, like Sega Saturn, so you could just wait. Or you can have it all now. The full-tilt, top-of-the-line, true 32-bit arcade experience. Way better than the competition, for a phenomenal price of less than $150. On November 21st, 1994, the 32X launched in North America and sold fairly well. According to some reports, demand outran the supply of the 600,000 units available at launch. It debuted at a price of $159.99, slightly more expensive than promised, but less than half of what the Sega Saturn would cost. A month later, the 32X launched in Europe and Japan. By this time, the Saturn had already launched in Japan, which gave Japanese gamers little incentive to buy a 32X. The 32X came with an AC adapter, AV cables, connector cables, electromagnetic shield plates, and a spacer. It was compatible with the Genesis Model 1, Model 2, and the CDX. Hooking up the 32X is interesting. According to the manual, the electromagnetic shield plates need to be inserted into the Genesis. This was to prevent RF signal interference and to comply with FCC regulations. If the user had a Genesis Model 2, the spacer had to be attached to the bottom. Without it, the 32X can wobble. Although honestly, the 32X works fine without either of these attachments. The connector cable goes from the AV out in the Genesis to the AV in on the 32X. Then the AV cable goes from the 32X AV out to the television. The Genesis and 32X each require their own power. It's a lot of plugs. Sega actually came out with their own power strip, specifically designed to house all of these AC adapters. The 32X was designed to be a permanent addition to the Genesis, so players could plug the 32X in and play either a Genesis game or a 32X game. There was plenty of buzz around the 32X when it debuted, but that fizzled fast, mainly because of the games. When they hyped the add-on at the Consumer Electronics Show that summer, Sega said that the 32X would have an extensive library of games, but only 3 titles were available when the 32X launched: Virtua Racing, Doom, and Star Wars Arcade. Virtua Racing is considered the best of the 3 launch titles. It was previously released on the Genesis, but the 32X version is much improved. It also contains 2 new tracks and 2 new vehicles. It's close to the original arcade version and is a solid port. Doom is a classic first-person shooter and was really big at the time, but the 32X version was rushed to meet deadlines. It definitely shows. The music isn't very pleasant, and this version is actually missing levels. Finally, there is Star Wars Arcade. Despite receiving mediocre scores from critics for repetitive gameplay, Star Wars Arcade was the best-selling 32X launch title. People just loved Star Wars, so the game was a system seller. Slowly, more games trickled in. Many of them were rushed through production, and it showed. The production timelines were too tight for some of the titles, which led to last-minute scrambles and headaches for Sega, and disappointment for players. Those that did make it to market in time didn't take full advantage of the 32X's capabilities. Cosmic Carnage was so bad that Sega didn't even want to ship it out. And fans were particularly disappointed that a 3D Sonic game, which had been teased at the Consumer Electronics Show, was nowhere to be found. In fact, the 32X would never get a Sonic game. The closest it came was Knuckles Chaotix, a spin-off of the Sonic series that featured an interesting bungee gameplay mechanic. The 1994 holiday season was rough on Sega, but the 32X was only part of the problem, because while their hot new add-on crashed and burned, their competition raked in the cash. On the same day the 32X was released, Nintendo released Donkey Kong Country. The game sold like crazy. It would go on to become the 3rd best-selling Super Nintendo game of all time, just behind Super Mario World and Super Mario All-Stars. The game was a smash hit, both with critics and players. But it was also a smack in the face to Nintendo's competition. When Atari, Sega, and 3DO zigged, Nintendo zagged. Atari's Jaguar, Sega's 32X, and the 3DO chased power. Nintendo, on the other hand, created a really fun game that pushed hardware limits for their 16-bit system. For Sega especially, it was a bitter pill to swallow. Sales of the 32X dropped off sharply after the holiday season. Word was out. Critics and fans finally agreed. The 32X was a mere stopgap. Many of the developers who'd been planning games for the 32X went in a new direction. Some abandoned the projects entirely, while others reworked them for the Sega Saturn. But Sega wasn't ready to give up on the 32X just yet. They went back to their original idea for a 32-bit Genesis and announced the Sega Neptune. The Neptune would be a standalone console that could play 32X and Genesis games. It was slated to launch by the end of the year for less than $200. But as the 32X crashed and burned, and the date for the Saturn's North American launch grew closer, Sega scrapped the Neptune. As 1995 wore on, the price of the 32X dropped from $160 to $99, and finally to the clearance price of $19.95. The 32X library eventually grew to include 40 titles, a handful of which you had to have the 32X and the Sega. In October of 1995, Sega CEO Hayao Nakayama canceled all Sega consoles, except the Saturn. It was a move to focus the company's resources on the latest console war, thus officially ending the short life of the 32X. All of this left a bad taste in the mouths of fans. They believed the Sega hype, and they got burned for it. The 32X games didn't live up to expectations, and neither did the add-on itself. There were other, smaller annoyances too. People didn't like that the 32X needed its own AC adapter. The Genesis already required one, and so did the Sega CD. Taken as a whole, the system was bulky from the front and a mess of cords in the back. But that was nothing compared to how 32X owners felt when the Sega Saturn came out roughly 6 months later in North America. While critics argued that the 32X was just a placeholder, Sega of America didn't feel the same way. They sunk $10 million into advertising and publicly said they were going to support the system. But poor sales of the 32X ended that promise. Scott Bayless, a senior producer at Sega of America, said, "I'm Joe Gamer, and I decided to take the plunge and buy 32X. Now, about 10 minutes later, you guys tell me I need to dump my 32X and buy Saturn? But now I'm broke." 32X was also a body blow to Sega's credibility. The first punch was Mega CD, and then along comes 32X. Another rushed launch with a weak starting lineup. At that point, even the die-hard Sega fans were starting to ask what the heck we were thinking. The 32X is an impressive piece of engineering, considering the constraints of the project. But the truth is, Sega should have scrapped the 32X before they brought it to market. The 32X damaged Sega's relationship with customers, game developers, and game critics, and did lasting damage to the company itself. They spent the early 90s threatening Nintendo's dominance of the video game industry, but after the 32X, Sega lost its edge. Bayless recalled, "Frankly, it made us look greedy and dumb to consumers, something that a year earlier I couldn't have imagined people thinking about us. We were the cool kids." That's all for this episode of The Gaming Historian. Thanks for watching. This episode of The Gaming Historian is sponsored by Dollar Shave Club. We all have our everyday grooming routines, brushing your teeth, styling your beautiful hair, and of course shaving. But sometimes when I'm deep in research, I forget to do the basics, and I quickly grow a patchy, scruffy mess. I've never been able to grow a full beard, so I like to keep a clean.
Hi guys, so today we're going to have a look at 15 of the many cancelled Dreamcast games, and there are a lot. If you look out there online, there are a lot of games that were planned for the Dreamcast but never emerged. Now, I kind of cherry-picked 15 that I find quite interesting, but they're varying sort of quality of how much they were finished. So some of the games like Austin Powers, which isn't in the video, Austin Powers, what was it called, Mojo Racer or something. I mean, that was probably not very far in development because all I can find is really some screenshots of the character design and what have you. And then some games like Half-Life, which is also not in the video, is pretty much finished, so you can get a repro like that one and play it on your Dreamcast. A couple of other games that are in the video I've got repros of, and I'll leave a link in the description to my repro guide if you're interested in getting any of them, and a couple of other links to places where you can get repros if you want to grab some. So anyway, without further ado, let's have a gander at my 15 cancelled Dreamcast games. Many will know Dragon's Crown, Vanillaware's 2D action RPG on the PS3 and Vita, but not many know that it was originally intended for release on the Dreamcast. A sequel to Princess Crown on the Saturn, Dragon's Crown was originally conceived in 1998 by Vanillaware president George Kamitani, but couldn't find a publisher willing to bring the project to the Dreamcast. When Dragon's Crown finally saw release 15 years later in 2013, the game's art book contained a piece of concept art from the Dreamcast version, which would have had 3D models rather than the 2D of the final game. Skies was an MMO set in a fantasy world of flying creatures, including angels, dragons and vampires. It was described as a state-of-the-art flight simulation technology in a 3D universe, allowing the player to interact with thousands of other online users. It was developed by Paradigm Entertainment, but the concept and publishing were by Sega. Initially a PC exclusive, it was announced that Skies was coming to Dreamcast, although the port never emerged. D-Jump was an action platformer being released by Ubisoft during 1997 and 98, and was intended for release on the Dreamcast, the PlayStation 2 on which it would be a launch title, and PC. it was cancelled a year and a half into the development process, but I'm not sure why. D-Jump starred an athletic raster and blended action and platforming elements with a plot based around time travel. The game spans several time periods, as is evident from the concept art, with the player trying to discover why the main character is slowly turning into wood. There doesn't seem to be too much information available for a game that was so far on in development, but quite an interesting one judging by the concept art alone. The art style rather reminds me of Little Big Adventure. Hellgate was in development for 15 months before cancellation, developed by Horny Dog with Jester Interactive handling the publishing. The game was said to be a cross between Quake and Wipeout, blending third-person shooter gameplay with that of an arcade racer. The player was to race through levels on a hovering motorbike while using a variety of weapons to slay demons. Both local and online multiplayer modes were planned. Hellgate was eventually cancelled, partly due to the Dreamcast's demise, and partly due to rumoured disinterest with the project among certain staff members. In 2009 a beta was leaked, so you can actually try it for yourself on your Dreamcast. Glover 2 was a planned sequel to Glover, a 3D platformer for the PlayStation, N64 and PC, in which the protagonist is an anthropomorphic glove. The game was cancelled when it was 80 to 85% complete, apparently due to some miscalculations made during the manufacture of its predecessor. A Hasbro employee severely overestimated the number of N64 carts that they would need for the original Glover, ordering the production of 300,000 carts, double the usual expected sales for a third-party N64 game of 150,000 units. So despite Glover selling well, Hasbro were left with around 150,000 carts that they couldn't shift, equating to around $500,000. The name Glover became associated with this terrible situation, and so Glover 2 never saw the light of day. A prototype of the N64 version of Glover 2 was discovered a while back, which is the footage you've been seeing on screen. Geist Force was supposed to be a launch title for the Dreamcast and one of the first Sega of America developed games for that platform. Geist Force was a planned launch title for the Dreamcast and one of the most interesting looking games on this list in my opinion. The game looked awesome, from its Star Fox-esque gameplay and graphics to its striking cutscenes, which were made by the special effects company that worked on Babylon 5. Sadly, this was all costing a great deal, and the game ended up being rather short and dull, despite its fancy presentation. The game was delayed, so as not to release a game that wasn't fully realised as a launch title, first impressions of a new console being very important. But further development would have cost more money than a flailing Sega were willing to spend. As a result, Geist Force was cancelled. A copy of the prototype was obtained by Assembler Games after a fundraiser and was released online, so you can play Geist Force on your Dreamcast. Just don't expect a fully polished experience, but it's still worth playing to see what could have been. A real shame in my opinion, as this game looks like it would have been excellent with a bit of tweaking. Castlevania Resurrection was set to be the third 3D Castlevania game after 1999's two N64 outings. The planned plot focused on Sonia and Victor Belmont and was set around 25 years before the original NES game. The game was cancelled in March of 2000, apparently due to the decline of the Dreamcast and rumoured disagreements between Konami's Japanese and North American staff. Agatha, or Agatha, is an interesting looking horror adventure which began development in 2000. Set in a Romanian village in 1929, under which the subterranean city of Agatha imprisons evil. The story follows main character Kirk as he explores the snow-covered village, encountering demons, zombies and all manner of evil. Gameplay was set to combine action with puzzle-solving elements and was to be a horror game in the same vein as games like Alone in the Dark. Player choices were to affect the storyline, as Kirk could choose whether to save the village's population or to side with evil. Agartha was cancelled in 2001 when the Dreamcast was discontinued, which is a shame because judging by some of the concept art here, it looks like it could have been great. Propeller Arena, full title Propeller Arena Aviation Battle Championship, was developed by Sega's renowned AM2 and was due for release in November 2001. Set in the future, the game involves planes from World War II participating in dogfights. With several game multiplayer modes and a focus on online play, Propeller Arena really shows off the Dreamcast's capabilities, as to be expected with AM2 being behind the wheel. Sadly, the timing couldn't have been worse. As I mentioned, Propeller Arena was due for release in November of 2001, just weeks after the tragic events of 9/11. As the game contained planes, and one level in particular in which those planes would crash into tall buildings, the game was postponed so as not to be deemed in poor taste. As the Dreamcast was on the way out anyway, the game never actually saw release. This is criminal, as Propeller Arena was entirely finished, and it's bloody good fun too. You can download the game to play yourself, and I have a rather well done PAL reproduction of it actually, so I'll leave a link in the description to my repro guide if anyone would like a copy. A video made in 2000 emerged on the internet which showed an intro sequence for Thunder Force 6 on the Dreamcast, suggesting that it was at one point in development. The band Noise released an album called Broken Thunder in 2001, which featured music that would have been on the Thunder Force 6 soundtrack. Composer and Noise band member Tsukumo Hyakutaro had composed music for several of Technosoft's previous games. I'm not sure whether Thunder Force 6 was planned as a Japanese exclusive or whether it would have made it to Western shores, and I have no idea why it never saw release. But Technosoft's last release was in 1998, and they haven't been active in the industry since the early 2000s. Seemingly, Sega of Japan had planned to bring the Streets of Rage franchise to the Dreamcast since early on in the console's life, in the form of Streets of Rage 4. A tech demo eventually appeared online, showing the game's planned 3D graphics and even a first-person viewpoint, and rumour has it that various new features were planned, such as team attacks. The reason the game never materialised was due to Sega of America allegedly being unfamiliar with the series and its popularity. I don't know whether or not this is true, but I find it insane that anyone at Sega could be unaware of one of the company's most beloved franchises. Whatever the reason, I take comfort in the fact that this game never saw release, as if and when we do see a fourth game in the Streets of Rage franchise, I'd like it to remain faithful to its 2D predecessors. Echo the Dolphin 2 Sentinels of the Universe was to be a sequel to Echo the Dolphin Defender of the Future, developed by Appaloosa Interactive. Very little was known about the game until a playable beta was found in a Dreamcast dev kit and was released online. You can now download this to disc and play it on your Dreamcast, albeit in a very unpolished form. Take the Bullet, developed by Red Lemon Studios, was to be a light gun game for the Dreamcast with a secondary third-person view and both online and local multiplayer modes. What differentiated it from other Dreamcast light gun games was that your weapon appeared on screen, much like it would in a first-person shooter. Set in 60s America, Take the Bullet sees the player assume the role of a bodyguard, tasked with protecting a presidential candidate from a gang of thugs, and must also coordinate with other members of the bodyguard team to do so successfully. Initially planned for a European release during Christmas '99, the game was delayed and in the end never emerged. Tom from the Dreamcast Junkyard managed to get his hands on a very early build of Take the Bullet, which is the footage you're seeing on screen, so I'll leave a link to Tom's channel and the Dreamcast Junkyard's website in the description. A sequel to 1992's Chakan the Forever Man on the Mega Drive was planned for the Dreamcast, being developed by the original game's creator Ed Annunziata. At some point, probably early on, the game was scrapped and all that remains is a character tech demo and some concept art. Some of the assets were subsequently used in Blood Omen 2, which came to the other 6th generation consoles, on which Ed was lead artist. Picasso was a planned stealth theft game in which the player must steal artwork to win a bet with another thief. Initially planned for the Dreamcast, development then moved to the PlayStation 2 and GameCube, but all that ever seemed to surface was a primitive concept video. Halfway through development, the developer Promethean Designs boss saw Shenmue, which had just been released, and decided to completely change Picasso's gameplay to imitate it. It became a hybrid of the planned stealth gameplay and an adventure game, but failed to get very far. Promethean Designs fell into financial difficulty and subsequently went bust. So those were 15 of the many cancelled Dreamcast games. Sometimes it was for the best, but often it was a great shame that some of these games never saw release. The early demise of the system certainly didn't help, although with so many Dreamcast games still being released today, can we really say the Dreamcast is dead? I don't think so. Thanks for watching!
Colossus の SA 比で
もしサターンでファイナルファンタジーで出たら未来は変わった。どうか。
MH 見る。
まあプレステ版よりはかな。
Actually, this is from Tiger, but it got the ideas off of Nintendo's Simon Quest, and they got Double Dragon.
ね。今度はなんだ。続かんかったやろな。あら
Nintendo has posters like, here's a Nintendo poster.
Super Nintendo versus Sega
どのみち
Genesis.
セガは時代に合わない技術取り入れて破滅の道歩んでたと思うよ。
It's truly a nostalgic battle. We were talking about it 20 years ago, and we're still talking about it today. So ever since I started doing the Nerd series, I always felt like it would make a great subject for a video, but I've always held back because I felt the whole thing is so much bigger than I am. How could I do it justice? To really do a proper analysis of both systems would take months and months of concentrating on just that. So the only thing I can give is an opinion. So I figured I might as well take the approach of just taking you back to the past, because that's what I do best. And there's no better way to go back to the past than to hear it from my past self at age 11. That's right, I already made a video about this topic. I might as well just sit back. Nintendo versus Genesis.
In the commercials, they say that Genesis is better than Nintendo.
Where am I?
But you see, this is Nintendo 8-bit.
I can't see a damn thing.
Thank you. Alright, now, so Genesis always brags about how good it is.
As you can tell, I'm talking about the Genesis commercials. I'm sure everybody's seen them by now, but if you haven't, here's a refresher.
Genesis does
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does
16-bit sports action.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis
does.
Genesis
Nintendo. Buy a 16-bit Genesis.
Nintendo?
Can't do this on Nintendo, they said. Genesis does what Nintendo doesn't.
See, even as a kid, I couldn't bring myself to say Nintendo. But in hindsight, it was a great commercial. Just the fact that we're talking about it now means it really left an impression. It worked. I'm sure that commercial alone sold many Genesis Mega Drives. But back then, that commercial was the bane of my existence. How dare you talk about Nintendo like that? They took a cheap shot. I took it personal, as if one of my best friends just got bullied. So there I am, pissed off, making a video about it. I guess nothing's changed. So, little Jimmy, tell us why the Nintendo brand is better than Sega.
It has more games, like, wait a minute. Wait right there.
Okay.
Well, some pocket video games. Wait. Actually, this is from Tiger, but they got the ideas off of Nintendo Simon Quest, and they got the
Wait. If we're talking about great classic games made by Nintendo, how about Super Mario Bros. 3 or something like that? But no, the Tiger handheld version of Simon's Quest? I still have it.
Nintendo has posters like, here's a Nintendo poster.
Ah, take that, Sega. Nintendo's got posters.
And Nintendo has guidebooks.
You mean strategy guides?
Here, see Nintendo guidebooks?
Or Nintendo Power.
These are Nintendo characters. Look at these awesome labels for the controllers.
I still have those. And they are awesome.
The power gun allows you to shoot at characters on the Nintendo screen.
That's the zapper, but they should have called it the power gun, like the power glove and the power pad.
Well, the power pad,
yeah, you got
giant controller.
Okay, you got that? Reasons why Nintendo is better than Sega. Tiger handheld Simon's Quest, posters, guidebooks, characters, controller stickers, power gun, and power pad. Boom! In your face, Sega! Obviously, I was showing a lot of faith to the Nintendo brand. I was what you might call a fanboy. But in truth, I was envious over the 16-bit glory of the Genesis. The graphics they showed in that commercial, you couldn't do that on Nintendo.
Wrong. You can do that on Nintendo.
Oh yeah.
They invented a Super Nintendo with 16-bit graphics.
Now that's what we're talking about. The Super Nintendo felt like Nintendo's answer to Sega. But did the battle stop there? Nope. It only started.
And in the commercials, they keep bragging about Genesis. They said that Genesis is even better than the Super Nintendo, but they're both 16-bit.
Sega had a point before, but now it's like a bully who's gonna pick on an even bigger kid.
The Sega Genesis has blast processing. Super Nintendo doesn't. So what's blast processing do?
It was ingenious! Blast processing! Every kid who saw that commercial remembered that term. Sega fanboys now had some new ammunition to use. So Sega's marketing team was like feeding all these arguments in the school cafeteria with like all these new words to use. I remember being on the school bus trying to tell one of my friends Super Nintendo's better, and he kept saying blast processing. It worked. The term caught on like wildfire. It worked so well that even to this day, we're still talking about it. The internet is a new playground to continue all these old arguments. It picked up just like before with everyone debating whether or not blast processing is real or not. I've seen it on message boards. It's real, it's not real, it's real, it's not real. What's the story? Well, I looked into it. According to the technical specs, the Genesis is faster. I can't find many great side-by-side comparisons to really demonstrate it. The Sonic the Hedgehog games seem to be the classic example. The term blast processing was made up for the commercial, because that sounds way cooler than just pointing out the facts. Imagine if the commercial said, the Sega Genesis has a 7.6 megahertz processor. The Super Nintendo only 3.6. That's not as catchy. Commercials aren't about stating facts. They're about just what are people going to remember. Say blast processing and every kid is going to start using it even if they don't know what it means. Like I used to say bits all the time and I never knew what that meant. And it's hilarious that if you look at the rest of the specs, the Super Nintendo outshines the Genesis in almost every other detail, but they found that one thing to exploit, and that's the nature of marketing. One time I had a playful argument about chocolate milk. And this is two grown adults, I might add. I was working at a convenience store, and every day I drink this milk mixed with a chocolate mix, and my friend would always drink the regular chocolate milk out of the bottle. I told him mine was better, so we compared nutrition facts, and it turns out mine had less sugar, more vitamins, and was better in just about every way, but his had a little more vitamin D in it. So every day then he would come into work, sipping his chocolate milk and go, "Love that vitamin D." Yeah, we got bored at work a lot. Also, notice the game they chose to make fun of was Super Mario Kart.
And what if you don't have blast processing?
Have you played Super Mario Kart? That's a great fun game. So they're comparing it to Sonic just to show how much faster the Genesis is. But what are we comparing here? Vertical speed versus straight-on racing? It doesn't scroll as fast because it's a totally different kind of game. I'm looking into it way too deep, but the point is it's another marketing strategy. Make your product look as cool as possible and make the competitor look like crap. It's easy. I'm going to make my own Genesis commercial right now. Hey kid, you still playing that Super Nintendo? Look at what Sega Genesis has got. And Super Nintendo has got this. So what's the choice? That was fun. You see, you can make anything look as good or as crappy as you want. And I think as a kid, I saw that in the commercials, and I felt that these commercials were brainwashing other kids, and that's what pissed me off. I felt like it was just manipulating other kids to think whatever they wanted them to think. The whole blast processing thing was almost like an act of desperation from Sega, just trying to get through the point that the Genesis was better and using any tactics they could. Almost like me as a kid trying to defend the NES because of stickers on the controllers. So I was just trying to speak up how I felt and didn't really know how to.
Remember, when you play Nintendo, you're playing with power. When you play Game Boy, you're playing with portable power. When you play Super NES, you're playing with Ultra Power, and Genesis, no power.
Well, there you go. Now you got yourself a slogan. Needs a little work, but you're thinking, or I'm still thinking. Yeah, I've come a long way in being able to articulate myself, and I've never thought about it till now, but I think those Sega commercials played a part in teaching me how to edit, how to make videos, because when I'm doing a nerd video, for example, and I'm trying to tell you how bad the game is, I'm going to be selecting all the parts that are bad to show you, and if it's awesome, I'm going to show you all the parts that are good. So unless you see the original product for yourself, you can't really take an objective view, because that's the way the media is. It's always through someone's opinion. So who am I to make a judgment of Super Nintendo versus Sega Genesis? Have I really played enough of both consoles to really make a fair assessment? But hey, it's an opinion, and I gotta give you what you want. You click on a video that says Super Nintendo versus Sega Genesis, you're expecting a throwdown. So let the throwdown begin. Let's start with the most obvious, the look of the console. The Genesis has a more modern shape. It looks cool. The Super Nintendo looks like a blocky kid's toy with purple switches. And for some reason, lots of Super NES consoles turn yellow over time. I don't know why. Maybe everyone pisses on them. I don't piss on mine, and it's one of the best aged Super Nintendos I've ever seen. The Genesis looks more slick, not counting all the different models and all that crap that gets attached to it. Winner, Genesis. The Genesis controller is straightforward and simple. 4 buttons if you count start. Super Nintendo, 8 buttons if you count start and select. That makes it way easier to play fighting games like Mortal Kombat. On Genesis, there's not enough buttons. You have to use start to block, and both high punch and low punch are on the A button. With games like Street Fighter that require 6 buttons, you have to hit start to select between punches and kicks, or get another controller. But we're comparing the basic controller that came with the console. The Super Nintendo has all the buttons you need in all the right places. I can easily press L or R, and my thumbs are still free. In a Mario-type game, I can hold down Y to run and push the rest of my thumb onto B to jump. It helps that the buttons are all on an angle. On Genesis, they're all in a straight line. I have to hop my thumb back and forth. The Super Nintendo feels more comfortable. That rounded dog bone shape fits in your hands perfectly. I guess one plus about the Genesis is that you can plug in an Atari controller. That's pretty cool, right? Winner, Super Nintendo. This may seem like a minor thing, but isn't it nice to have something to put your game in? The Super Nintendo games had the standard cardboard boxes, but the Genesis boxes weren't boxes at all. They were plastic cases that snap open. That's a good idea. In retrospect, it's great for collecting too. It's much easier to find a Genesis game complete in the box. With the Super Nintendo, the boxes just got in the way, so most people threw them out. The Genesis cases were progressive, and it's now what every game console uses. Winner, Genesis. Being able to play your old games on your new console is a great feature to have. The Super Nintendo had the Super Game Boy, which allowed you to play your Game Boy games. The Genesis had no such adapter for the Game Gear, although it did have the power-based converter, which was for playing Sega Master System games. This was an official contraption from Sega, but Super Nintendo had an unlicensed version of the same thing called the Super 8, which played NES and Super Famicom games. That makes things pretty even, but thanks to the Super Game Boy, the winner is Super Nintendo. Graphics is a hard one. I've already mentioned the Super Nintendo is technically superior with a greater color palette and all that, and it makes sense to me that a newer console would be more advanced. But look at them. They both look pretty good to me. It really depends on which games you're comparing. Alright Jimmy, so help us out with the graphics. The Super Nintendo just came out, so what do you think?
It's perfect. Look at these graphics. And rotation, like in here, and like in F-Zero, you curve around the racing turns and you could just, it feels like you're really moving. And it has smooth animation, like suppose someone waving their hand in imagination. It moves it just a notch. Takes 16 notches to move the hand down, and another 16 notches to move it up. So that means it's smooth animation. Scaling.
I'm talking about scaling?
Like for instance, a car racing away, it shrinks. Super Nintendo has great things that just shrinks as it falls, and it has great resolution. Resolution is a very impressive 512 times 448. That's twice the resolution of other 16-bit video games. Color layering, big characters, and multi-color scrolling backgrounds.
Whoa. I think my younger self just went way over my head. So how does it all stack up today? Well, I think both systems are very comparable, but the Super Nintendo impresses me still just a little bit more.
I say the 16-bit Super Nintendo is a bit better than Genesis. Ha! Get it? A bit better?
One thing that helped push it over the line was the FX chip used in games like Doom and Star Fox, which helped to render three-dimensional shapes. This was a new achievement later in the Super Nintendo's lifespan, which made it exciting that our 16-bit console could improve itself. The Genesis, on the other hand, was on life support, using hardware add-ons like the Sega CD and the 32X, just to accomplish the same thing the Super Nintendo already could.
Hey!
You still don't have a Sega CD? Huh? What are you waiting for? Nintendo to make one?
There is no Nintendo CD.
I never understood the purpose. You have to own a Genesis to play a Sega CD or a 32X. Winner, Super Nintendo. When it comes to sound, there's no question about it. The sound effects on the Super Nintendo were far superior.
Johnny Cage.
And the music on the Super Nintendo just got me so pumped up. It is fair to say that they're both two different things, that each console had their own distinct style. I will say, as much as I love the orchestral cinematic sound of the Super Nintendo, I also love the gritty heavy metal sound of the Genesis too. Games like Earthworm Jim sounded better on the Genesis. So there are exceptions, but most of the time, the Super Nintendo rocks the competition. It's the first console I ever heard where it crossed the line of video game music and just started to sound like real music. The Super Nintendo has some of the greatest video game themes ever. Winner, Super Nintendo. Both consoles had a great library of games. Genesis had Altered Beast, Moonwalker, the Shinobi games, Strider, Toe Jam and Earl, and the best version of Ghostbusters that existed back then. Super Nintendo had Pilot Wings, the Mega Man X games, and the best version of SimCity around. A lot of the same games that crossed over to both consoles came out almost the same and are hard to compare. Aladdin is an example where both versions are completely different from each other. In this case, the Genesis version is way better. All the Konami games are different, such as Ninja Turtles. Genesis got the Hyperstone Heist and Super Nintendo got Turtles in Time. These games are similar, but you can't beat Turtles in Time. Genesis got Contra Hard Corps, while Super Nintendo got Contra 3. Again, both are similar, but on the Genesis version, you can choose to play as different characters, including a wolf, and it didn't have that annoying overhead stage like in the Super Nintendo version. What were they thinking? Genesis got Castlevania Bloodlines, while Super Nintendo got Castlevania 4. Both are great, but Castlevania 4 blows my mind with its smooth control and creepy graphics. One of my favorite games of all time. Adventures of Batman and Robin. Both versions have awesome graphics that resemble the animated TV series that it's based on. But the Genesis version just nails it this time. It has the cutscenes that the Super Nintendo version's missing, and the stage graphics have a lot of three-dimensional depth. There seems to be a myth that Genesis is more of an adult console. That may be true that Nintendo seems to target younger audiences, but it's not all rainbows and flowers. All the hubbub comes from the first Mortal Kombat game. The Super Nintendo took out the blood and altered some of the fatalities. The Genesis version also didn't have the blood until you turn it on with a secret code. Starting with Mortal Kombat 2, Super Nintendo brought the blood back full on, so now it's a moot point. Super Nintendo had blood in Doom Troopers and in Doom, so there's no way you can say it's just a kiddie console. Even Nintendo's own branded game Super Metroid was dark in tone and overall badass. Both had their share of fighting games, but Killer Instinct, come on! It wasn't the same as the arcade, but it's still the best exclusive 16-bit fighter by far. The beat-em-up genre. Genesis had the Golden Axe games, Alien Storm, and Streets of Rage. Everyone always talks about Streets of Rage, but Super Nintendo had the Final Fight games. The first one didn't have a two-player option like the arcade, but they rectified that with the sequels. I don't know what it is, but beat-em-up games always feel more fun on the Super Nintendo. On the Genesis, they're a little bit clunky. On Super Nintendo, the action is smooth and it just feels right when you hit people. Genesis had more sports games, I'll give you that any day. You can keep your sports games, so if that's your thing, your console is Genesis. The RPG department, Super Nintendo just kills it. Final Fantasy III, which is actually 6, is one of the best games ever made. You can't compete with that. And that's not to say Genesis didn't have a share of RPGs. There was the Phantasy Star games, of course, but Super Nintendo also had Chrono Trigger, another masterpiece. That's a 1-2 punch. And also there's Super Mario RPG. May seem gimmicky to make an RPG just to include Nintendo characters, but it's a really fun game and much better than what most people may expect. Both consoles had their share of bad games. Super Nintendo had Wizard of Oz, Genesis had Action 52, and both consoles were unfortunate enough to have Shaq Fu. Then of course there's Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario World. Which is better? It's all a matter of preference. I will say Sonic 2 was the game that made me buy a Genesis. But even with all the Sonic games, I still could never live without Super Mario World. It may not have the fast speed action, but it has lots of power-ups, fun challenge, and an incredible world to explore. After all, it is Super Mario World. I love Sonic, but I feel with a good Mario game, there's just a little bit more to it. If there's one platformer that can top Super Mario World, it's the Donkey Kong Country games. They're so addicting that just trying to record the footage here, I had trouble turning it off. I wanted to keep playing. Between the Super Nintendo and Genesis, it all depends on what kind of games are your favorite. Possibly, my favorite game of all time is Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. The puzzle solving, the storyline, and the action that goes on in that game is so phenomenal, I'm at loss for words. It never gets old. I can still play it any day. I think this game just nukes the entire competition. If you ask me why do you like Super Nintendo better, my answer is Link to the Past. And if that's not enough, Super Metroid. I recommend it hardcore. This is a must-play game. It's a giant maze that you can't stop playing until it's finished. It has a foreboding atmosphere that keeps you tense the whole time. Running around blowing stuff up has never been so much fun. Take your pick, but the winner for me is Super Nintendo.
There you have it, Nintendo wins. It will take centuries to invent something that'll top that.
Give it a few years, Jimmy. So I just wanted to bring you back to a simpler time when there wasn't a care in the world other than defending your favorite console. There's always problems going on in the world and political issues and whatnot, but back then, all we cared about was what's better, Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo. And one thing I do know, the world wouldn't be complete without both of them. Long live the 16 bits.
アグネルをアイクにどうぞ。
評価狙いだと騎兵芸聖戦。
The killer is white, aged between 30 and 45. He doesn't act on impulse, but plans his crimes in a very meticulous fashion. He doesn't have anything personal against the victims. That's why he covers their faces with mud, to make them anonymous.
Why does he kill them if he doesn't have anything against them?
For him, they're more of an image, a symbol. That's probably why he gives them an origami figure and an orchid as gifts to apologize for what he's done to them.
Very interesting. And where does all that get us?
The best way of tracking a predator is to be familiar with his behavior.
Why not? That may be true in novels, but there's a child's life at stake here. Continue, Jaden.
One detail attracted my attention. The interval between the time when a victim disappears and the time when the body is found ranges from 3 to 5 days. The rainfall is always at 6 inches, give or take 10%.
What on earth does that mean?
All the victims are drowned in rainwater. The killer kills only in the fall when there is plenty of rain. It could be that he puts them in some sort of well or tank that is open to the skies and that fills up with rainwater. The more it rains, the less time the victim has to live. Then I studied the geographical distribution of the murders. Generally, a killer commits his first murder near to where he lives, so he has a safe place to flee to if any complications arise. The more confident he becomes, the further he roams from his base. By analyzing the locations where the victims disappear, I was able to isolate a zone where the killer might live.
And what size is this, zone?
For the moment, about 10 square miles.
Oh, great. There must be 10,000 people living in that sort of area. Are you gonna question them one by one?
The more clues we get, the more we can reduce the zone. We can then cross-check it with our list of suspects and identify the killer.
So what's next?
There are 2 suspects whose psychological profile might fit and can be connected to the comfort zone. I'd like to question them.
Damn it. We're wasting our time with this bullshit. The killer's out there somewhere. We gotta get off our asses and find him.
The killer is no ordinary murderer. He is intelligent, organized, and methodical. You won't find him by patrolling the streets.
Did you get your vast experience on the job, or did you just fucking read about it in some school book?
Your vast experience hasn't prevented 8 victims from being murdered.
Fucking asshole! That's enough! You said it took 6 inches of rainfall before the victim died. How much time do we have left?
If the weather forecasts are right, less than 72 hours.
That's wrong. Alright, let's check out the Mega Man X series for Super Nintendo. First and foremost, I have to say that Mega Man is probably my all-time favorite gaming franchise ever. I was so obsessed with Mega Man 3 as a kid that I actually copied a boss hit chart out of my friend's Nintendo Power. Mega Man will take a Mega Leap Super Jump out of fits. Okay. So yeah, I was really psyched for Mega Man X. And obviously it doesn't disappoint. At first blush, it's definitely much easier for a Mega Man game, but I liken it to Super Mario World. It's so much fun just to plow through this game in an hour or so and just smash everything in your way. Overall, the game is very polished, the level design is excellent, and it perfectly matches X's capabilities, if that makes sense. In other words, they put a lot of thought into the level design to make sure that it matches X's speed and range of motion. That can be difficult to do, and it goes a long way explaining why this game is held in such high regard. Mega Man X also has a lot of clever touches that can go unnoticed, like how some of the levels are interrelated, for instance. Like when you beat Storm Eagle, it screws up the electricity in Spark Mandrill's level for whatever reason, or when you beat Chill Penguin and Flame Mammoth's level freezes over. My only criticism is that the game is just too easy. I'm gonna sound like a cranky old man, but Mega Man was supposed to make a man out of you, you know? Put hair on your chest and feel intensely proud about beating that game. And yeah, I know I said the fact that this game is easier makes it a bit more fun to plow through, and objectively that's true, but I mean, just look at Chill Penguin here. Why are you just standing there blinking at me?
Do something! Gah!
Plus, some of the weapons are overpowered like crazy, like Storm Tornado and the Charged Rolling Shield. But yeah, as much as I love Mega Man X, I like the sequel, Mega Man X2, even more. And there's two reasons for that. Number one is the mid-air dash. It makes the game so much faster and even more fun. It reminds me of Sparkster's charged dash attack. I just love flying around in all directions, shooting everything that moves. It's so much fun. The second reason is the arm cannon upgrade. It's incredibly satisfying just to blast the hell out of stuff with a double-barreled attack. And plus, all the Maverick weapons you obtain can also be supercharged for a special attack. Mega Man X2 is also just a tiny bit more difficult in my opinion. It makes you be just a bit more precise with your jumping, especially to get certain sub-tanks and heart tanks. Although I will say the level design isn't as polished as it was in the first game. Wire Sponge and Bubble Crab stages in particular are pretty dull, and the final form of Sigma is like shockingly easy, which is disappointing, especially for a final boss. Still, I think Mega Man X2 for the most part takes everything good about the first game and makes it that much better in my opinion. On to Mega Man X3, and this is where the series starts to get weird. It has a much different feel from its predecessors because the levels are longer and much more difficult. Tunnel Rhino's stage, for instance, seemingly stretches on forever, and the level design just feels kind of off. It doesn't match X's capabilities as well, and there's also huge chasms of empty space for whatever reason. There's a lot of recycling of the same enemy sprites, which is a big disappointment, especially in a Mega Man game. You see the same guys over and over and over again throughout the game. The music also feels weird. It's almost somber sounding in places, like in Blizzard Buffalo's stage. Come on, this is a Mega Man game. Where's the power metal? There we go, that's more like it. To its strengths though, the game definitely dials up the difficulty. The constant enemy respawning reminds me of Ninja Gaiden for NES, which is both good and bad. The game also implements a new idea with the ride armor, which is really cool and introduces a new element of strategy, but it's kind of a missed opportunity. You can't even get most of these until you've already beaten all the Mavericks, so what's the point? They should have made them available and easy to find right from the get-go, and that would have helped curb some of the difficulty as well. Overall, Mega Man X3 just feels off and kind of uninspired, but it's still a Mega Man game on Super Nintendo, which is like pizza. There's no such thing as bad pizza. Pizza's always good. To sum up, you can't go wrong with Mega Man X or Mega Man X2. They're both classics for a reason, but if I had to pick one, it's X2 because of the mid-air dash and the supercharged double-barrel arm cannon.
That's strong.
スパデラ会話闇が深い。
Hello there, and welcome to part 1 of the Japan-only Super Famicom RPG series. There are many RPGs that were only released in Japan, like nearly 100. So I'm sorry I can't cover all of them in one video. I'm not insane. I just wanted to start with the more popular ones that have English translation patches. A huge thanks to BoneSnapDs from the Rocket Boy forums for providing a tremendous resource listing all of the RPGs. Click the link in the description to see it for yourself. Also, a huge thanks once again to Ziggy587, also from the Racket Boy forums, for his collection of information on flash cartridges. Again, click the link in the description to learn a bit about flash cards. Those are the best and easiest way to play these games on your original hardware. Now let's get to the games. I'm only going to be talking about 7 or 8 at a time per video. Not too much detail, I just want to talk about the guts of each game, like the combat system and the story and such. And like I said, I'm going to start with the popular ones, like Bahamut Lagoon. This is a strategy RPG from Squaresoft. If you're into classic JRPGs straight from the vein of games like Final Fantasy VI, but with strategy-based gameplay, then you gotta check this game out. The battles are turn-based on a grid, like most strategy games. Your team is grouped into 4s, each featuring a dragon, but you can't really control the dragons. They act kinda like the capsule monsters in Lufia 2. There's classes that allow for range attacks, or you can get close and do battle the usual way. Movement is a big part of Bahamut Lagoon, as you're allowed to use your surroundings to your advantage, or they may equally end up at your disadvantage depending on how your battle goes. Sometimes games like this become overwhelming with the absurd amount of micromanaging you have to do, but this game stays sensible in its approach, while allowing a huge amount of customization. Unfortunately, the story is a little incoherent. The English translation did its best, and kudos to the people who worked really hard on these things. But it still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What's evident is that the story is extremely cliché, with an empire ruling over a plucky resistance, a princess is kidnapped and develops Stockholm Syndrome for her captor. The story is not particularly unique, but the gameplay is what makes Bahamut Lagoon worth checking out. If you like the strategy grid-style combat but a little simpler, there's Treasure Hunter G. It's a much more streamlined combat system, but it still utilizes the basic strategy game components. And you can actually attack diagonally on the grid, which is nice. Really, if you're new to strategy RPGs, I highly recommend this one. It really does a nice job explaining how to play without it being dumbed down or holding your hand too much. The story is also streamlined without a lot of fluff or detail. It's just two brothers named Red and Blue whose dad is always getting into trouble, going on big treasure hunts, so they want to follow in his footsteps and do the same. They also have a helper monkey, and who doesn't love helper monkeys? The only glaring flaw with Treasure Hunter G is that the menu and item system are really outdated. For instance, you can't tell on the surface if a particular item like a weapon or armor is an upgrade or not to whatever you already have, and that's a pain in the ass. And also, you have to equip items to each character, so to speak. There isn't just a huge pool of stuff to pick from. You have to hand each item to one another, which is really kind of annoying. But really, Treasure Hunter G is a really fantastic game, thanks to its smooth combat system and its strong soundtrack especially. Next is perhaps the most hyped Japan-only release, Seiken Densetsu 3, or Secret of Mana 2. This utilizes similar combat gameplay as its predecessor, but with less of a mandatory wait between attacks. That makes things way more chaotic, and I enjoy it. Unfortunately, you still have to pause the game to use magic, and that's kind of annoying, but whatever. At its core, it's still the same Secret of Mana mechanics at work. They added a lot of neat little touches as well, like the different enemies appearing depending on if it's day or night, and a class system that allows for a lot of detailed customization. The story is freaking gigantic. There are 6 characters, and you, the player, can choose who the main character should be, plus choosing 2 partners. All 6 people want the Mana Sword, and they each have their own motivations. And yeah, some are more interesting than others. Each character's story eventually comes together to form one big narrative, but still, the replay value of this game is just crazy. It can take well over 30 hours and at least 6 playthroughs to get through every character's storyline. It's a really cool idea, and it's executed very well. So yeah, Seiken Densetsu 3 takes the classic top-down beat-em-up gameplay, adds an inventive storyline mechanic that gives incentive to play the game a ton. It's beautiful looking. Well, all the games on this list are, but this one stands out. And plus, the soundtrack is top-notch. If you only get one game from this video, make sure it's this one, Seiken Densetsu 3. In Star Ocean, a disease starts turning people into stone. Your team of soldiers has to find a cure on the top of Mount Meteorus. But when you finally get there, you find these guys who politely inform you that this disease is actually a biological weapon and an act of war from another alien race. So we all hop on a spaceship and cruise around the galaxy to find a cure. What really makes the story stand out in Star Ocean, though, is the private action mechanic. It's entirely optional, but when you show up to any town, your party can split up to gather town gossip, which can potentially trigger larger events in the story, and sometimes even cause 2 particular characters to have a closer relationship. Which leads to really cool stuff, like having an increased attack power out of rage if your friend is defeated in battle. It's really an amazing feature that adds a ton of depth to the gameplay. The battle system is real-time, but not quite like Secret of Mana or Zelda. It's an interesting hybrid between the usual RPG battle engine and real-time top-down battles. You can have up to 4 party members in battle, which causes some good fun and chaos, but you only control 1 player at a time. And the computer AI isn't exactly the best when it comes to controlling the other characters. But yeah, Star Ocean is well worth checking out, just to experience the private actions mechanic. It's very cool. Tales of Phantasia is very similar to Star Ocean in terms of the battle system, but instead of a top-down view, you have a 2D side view that scrolls the screen to the left or right depending on where the battle goes. Again, this isn't turn-based, you only control 1 person, so you're left at the mercy of the computer AI sometimes, which isn't always fun. As for the story, it's just okay. You start out immediately fighting this sorcerer named Deos. He's on the verge of defeat before he casts a spell to travel way into the future, where he promptly runs into your party's descendants. Whoops. They seal him away into 2 magic pendants. Many years pass, the pendants are stolen, Deos is revived, you get the idea. The character interactions, in my opinion, are really cringeworthy. I'm not that experienced with the Tales series, but I'm told that's just how it is with these games. I wouldn't call Tales of Phantasia the best game on this list. I'm not hating on it, it's just my opinion, but I gotta include it because it's a very impressive piece of work. The graphics and the soundtrack really stand out as something special. Final Fantasy V is one of the better games in its series, but it's not quite as good as the 4th or 6th game. Still, it's worth checking out because it's a little bit of a departure from the normal Final Fantasy experience because of the job system, where you eventually accumulate up to 22 different jobs you can pick from to apply to your party. It's mostly your typical stuff, like knights for more powerful attacks, and black mage for black magic, and that kind of stuff. Although, as you collect more crystal shards, you get more jobs available. And there's a lot of room for combinations and customization, with secondary commands available as well. You can also switch jobs at will, which is fantastic. That's really what makes this game stand out among its peers. Not only is this game unique in the series because of the job system, but the tone of the story is much lighter as well. And personally, I appreciate that, because as much as I like the stories of the 4th and 6th games, it's a much needed change of pace from the overwrought, over-serious nature of not just the usual Final Fantasy story, but the usual JRPG story. So yeah, Nintendo of America didn't think it was worth the time and effort to localize the game back in the early 90s, but thankfully Final Fantasy V was re-released on PlayStation and Game Boy Advance, and it's also available in the PSN store as well as on iOS and Android devices. It's really well done and a nice change of pace for both Final Fantasy and the JRPG genre. Then there's Terranigma. Terranigma is technically the sequel to Illusion of Gaia, which was a sequel to Soul Blazer, but it's not at all necessary to play those games to understand what's happening in Terranigma. But if you liked those games at all, then you'll love this one. It implements the same style of gameplay, which is closer to an action or adventure game than an RPG. Still, the music, storytelling, and visual presentation are very much JRPG-ish. There are some cleverly made puzzles to get past, and the sound of destroying an enemy is addicting. The only gameplay function that feels a bit outdated, in my opinion, is the save system. There's not nearly enough save points, but whatever. The story is that you're this little troublemaker kid named Ark. He stumbles upon a hidden door, which as a result freezes everything in his own village. Whoops. So in order to unfreeze everything, he's got to leave the village for the first time and go to this parallel universe and revive everything. There's an interesting twist that I won't spoil, but it's well done, and it keeps the story from being too generic. Personally, I like the puzzles and level design in Illusion of Gaia a bit more, but the story in Terranigma is light years more coherent and more interesting. Again, if you liked Soul Blazer and Illusion of Gaia, or stuff like Lufia 2 and Link to the Past, then you will definitely like Terranigma. Whew, okay, that's it for now. I hope to do more of these videos, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching. Hello and welcome again to the Super Famicom RPG series. If you missed part 1, I covered Bahamut Lagoon, Treasure Hunter G, Seiken.
これもバグか。顔、面崩れ。
アーク 123R で、家へと書き置きを感じるよね。
レプ、ココアのおかわりいる。
そうだよ。
アークは3まで走る必要あったんですかね。濃いな、わら。
今から怖い。
はい、飲み物のおかわりを。
ひどい。
グロシ。ピクミンかな。ミリーかな。
クトゥルフ。
ああ、無理。
紙袋かぶせればいける。
怖いな。
ねねねね
薄い本かな？
臭い。
カオルスグルトか。
ね
顔が濃い。
ねね
あら。比較で流してるの。
では。
心停止。
壺を割った呪いかな。ノーマル矢印バグって感じで。心停止した。
これはひどい。これ誰もチェックせずに発売したんすかね。
正体表したね。ねね
冥界から復帰できた。
女の体なのに兄弟とは。
こいついつも壺壊してんな。
二なりでしょ。恋姫。かな。さあおしまい？白いお姉さんは誰？壺に何の罪が？チートバグとかじゃなくて普通にバグってるの？
ね。京太の壺壊しちゃった。ねね
男同士はないのか。プレステ4くらいじゃね。
お前ら兄妹やないの？
ね。
Hello and welcome again to the Super Famicom RPG series. If you missed part 1, I covered Bahamut Lagoon, Treasure Hunter G, Seiken Densetsu 3, Tales of Fantasia, Star Ocean, Final Fantasy V, and Terranigma. Click here to see it. Alright, let's keep chugging right along here. Let's start with two of the very best games never released in the US. First, Live-A-Live. It's in many aspects a traditional turn-based RPG, but with a lot of interesting ideas thrown in. For starters, there's no magic points, there's no money, and your health is fully restored after every battle. What makes this game great, though, is that it's broken up into 7 different storylines. You can start with any of them and play through the game in any order that you want. Each storyline has a different theme and a different variation on gameplay. Once you finish them all, there are 2 more chapters that bring everything together. In one storyline, you're in feudal Japan, trying to prevent a shady character from sending everything into anarchy. The gameplay in that scenario is predicated on stealth. You can either fight everyone, fight some, or avoid everyone altogether. In another scenario, you're a caveman, and there's no dialogue at all, and the gameplay involves kind of an alchemy system, sort of like Secret of Evermore. In another scenario, you're a gunman in the Wild West. In another, you're a wrestler. In another, you're a robot where there isn't even any fighting. They really went all out making this game as different as possible, and the way everything comes together at the end is inventive storytelling, and it works so well. I wish more games had the balls to be this creative. If you've played stuff like Earthbound and Chrono Trigger and are looking for more, you have found it with Live-A-Live. Treasure of the Rudras, or Rudra no Hiho, is a fascinating game. Bear with me because this one's going to take a while to go over. On the surface, it definitely comes across as just another Final Fantasy clone, and yeah, it's got the typical JRPG appearance, with an overworld map, dungeons, towns, turn-based battles, and all that. But the game has 2 major things going for it. Number 1 is the magic system. You actually create your own spells called mantras, by combining parts of words together. You have 8 elements to choose from, the usual stuff like fire, wind, water, but you create your own mantras with how you combine the words those elements make up, by adding a prefix and suffix to each elemental word. Now, there's over 400 separate spells in this game, so this means there are a bazillion potential combinations to create mantras. It's a little bit like the alchemy system like you'd see in Secret of Evermore, but with way more possibilities. Here's an example of how it works, courtesy of this GameFAQs walkthrough. The mantra is called Yu Lef Na. You learn as you play that Lef is a recovery spell, Yu is the prefix that strengthens the spell, but as a result makes it cost more MP. Na is the suffix that targets all allies, but that also increases the MP cost. So like that, you just built a recovery spell that heals everyone in your party. That's just the very tip of the iceberg. If you're interested in learning more about how this system works, check out the link in the description to the GameFAQs walkthrough, written by Destiny Decider. Thanks, dude. The second reason this game stands out is the story, which is divided into 4 sections. 3 are laid out for you to choose in any order. Defeat all 3 and the 4th part is unlocked. Each section has its own protagonist, a soldier, a priestess, and an archaeologist. The actions and decisions you make can potentially affect the other scenarios later on. The gist of the story is that every 4,000 years, the human race is hit with a reset button by a deity named Rudra. The game takes place about 15 days before this happens, and time independently has its own day and night cycle, so time's a wasting. Things get pretty dark as you might expect, and the characters evolve as the story does. Treasure of the Rudras is an absolutely outstanding game in every respect. I really can't think of anything this game does poorly or even half-assed. It is a tremendous experience. The English fan translation makes it a little tricky to understand the magic system at first, but the game is still obviously very much playable. Go check this one out. Chaos Seed is as an ambitious game as you will find in the 16-bit era. You play as part of a group of cave dwellers that are in tune somehow with these deep caverns that dictate their planet's health. There's a big misunderstanding, and it's determined that the caverns themselves are the cause of the planet's slow decay. So, it's your character's duty to defend and rebuild the caverns. Oh, but first this dragon splits your soul apart so you end up scattered in all these different dimensions. Whoops. This is a unique story that's told well through the gameplay. It should be said, with such a complicated game like this, you're left at the mercy of the English translation, and the guys at Dynamic Designs did an amazing job, so hats off to them. But yeah, there's just so much to this game that it can be a little tricky to figure out what to do and how to do it. But once you understand, this game is really fun. You build caverns by creating these rooms. You assign a room a particular elemental power, while eliminating obstacles. Really, it's about building an entire system of elemental rooms that flow together to give the planet its energy back. It sounds weird and it's complicated, but once you get the hang of it, I'm not sure I'm doing this game full justice with this description. Ultimately, all I can say is that it's really cool. Mystic Arc is a more traditional console-style strategy role-playing game. I'm not entirely sure if it's an official sequel to 7th Saga, but it's very similar to that, as well as Brainlord, another Enix game. The overworld map has your usual random encounters, but there's a proximity map, so you can do your best to avoid them if you'd like. The battle screen really looks great. Honestly, it's probably my favorite part of this game. It reminds me of the Breath of Fire series. All the enemies, attacks, and spells look really sharp. The battle system itself, though, is as standard as it gets. If you're looking for something different or a unique twist, you won't find it here. But if you're looking to scratch that JRPG itch with something basic, Mystic Arc can provide that no problem. The story is again very standard. Are you sensing a theme here? Something is collecting souls from various worlds as part of this interdimensional portal, only you manage to escape. This goddess tells you what you gotta do to save everyone. The different worlds are all very diverse, but as a whole the game is just kinda dull. And a lot of worlds just involve fetch quests that take forever. I guess after playing Live a Live and Treasure of the Rudras and Chaos Seed, this game falls kind of flat by comparison. All I can say is that if you liked 7th Saga, you'd like Mystic Arc. It's not a bad game at all, it's just that you can find much better. And with that, we get even simpler with Alcahest. This game does not mess around. It knows exactly what it is. A straight-ahead, completely linear, top-down action RPG using all sorts of weapons, with 8 stages, 8 bosses, and lots of upgrades as you progress. You get some friends to help you too, but you can't control them directly. You do at least have the ability to trigger a special attack from them occasionally. Honestly, the story barely even matters. It's just kind of there. Not that different from a game like King of Dragons or Knights of the Round. So yeah, if you're looking for a good old-fashioned simple Zelda-style gameplay, then Alcahest is for you. The thing is, there's no battery save, just a password system. And really, there's not that much more to say about it. If you like this kind of action, it's there in spades. Bear in mind, there's not much in the way of puzzles at all, but Alcahest is still a fun experience in its own way. Ganparu Gunman's Proof is also an action RPG, but with a little more meat on its bones. Thematically, it's a departure from the rest of the games on this list, with kind of a sci-fi Wild West theme. In fact, this game is really funny, and had me laughing out loud more than once. The game takes place in 1880, where 2 spaceships thought to be meteors crash into Earth, one containing the valiant space sheriff Zero, the other containing the evil criminal Demi, who has the strange ability to turn other creatures into aliens, or something. I'm not sure exactly. And of course, they all start attacking townsfolk. Our nameless hero, meanwhile, volunteers to have his body possessed by the space sheriff Zero for some reason, to try and hunt down the evil villain through mazes and dungeons. As for the gameplay, again, it's very much like a Zelda clone, but with more emphasis on the action than puzzle solving. It is kind of fun to play this style of game with a projectile weapon, kind of like Smash TV or Zombies Ate My Neighbors or True Lies. You also get shotguns, machine guns, and eventually a flamethrower, all with unlimited ammo, so that's awesome. The game is very forgiving as well, respawning you with full life right where you die. There's not a lot of depth in Gunman's Proof, what you see is what you get, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Lastly, there's Ys 4, Mask of the Sun, not to be confused with Ys 4, The Dawn of Ys, for the PC engine. Those games tell the same story, but are pretty different games. Ys 4, of course, brings back Adolf from the previous games, as he finds a message in a bottle from the distant land of Celceta, and sets off on a quest to answer the distress call. Sounds simple, but things get more complex as they go along. The way the story is told is very well done. I wouldn't say you have to play the first 3 games in the series to understand the story, but if you're familiar with them, then the story of this game is way more rewarding. As for the gameplay, if you remember Ys 3, that had a side-scrolling combat approach similar to Zelda 2 for NES. Ys 4, however, harkens back to the first 2 games of the series with top-down combat, and the game really works well in that regard. It is kind of odd, though, because there is no attack button. You just have to run into enemies with some strategic timing. You just have to hit them kind of off-center, if that makes sense. Otherwise, you take damage, as well as the enemy. And you have to stay moving at all times, or you'll be killed before you know it. This is definitely a welcome approach to this style of game, and I like it a lot. It has kind of a shmup feel to it, if that makes sense, because there's a much larger emphasis on quickness and reflexes. It's definitely unlike any other game on this list. While I'm talking about this series, I have to mention Ys Memories of Celceta, which is kind of an updated version of this game and was deemed by the developer as an official replacement in the story canon for Ys 4. That was released for PlayStation Vita about a year ago, so that option is available for you too. And I also have to mention another game in the series on the Super Famicom, Ys 5, Lost Kefin Kingdom of Sand, where Adol is off to investigate a desert city that vanished. The gameplay isn't the same as Ys 4, however, as now it's a traditional sword and shield fighting, which is kind of a bummer, but there's a magic system as well that allows you to mix and combine elements to create new spells that you can equip. So that's pretty cool. Also, in an interesting twist, this game was released twice on the Super Famicom. The quote-unquote normal version, and an expert version, where the difficulty is presumably jacked up. Either way, I'd recommend Ys 4 over either version of Ys 5. Okay, that about does it for this list. Next time I hope to talk about the Romancing Saga series, and the Shin Megami Tensei series, along with a few other games. Thanks for watching, and have a great rest of your day.
イテラー。イテラー。イテラ。オボフ。
新女神天才。新女神天才。
わらわら。
サムネでもう。
くそ。出た。
ゲッタン。
ゲッタン。ね。
怖いな。
初めて見たとき、お腹痛くなったな。
怖いな。
首。赤。は。
通さない。
怖いな。
はあ、ね、なんやこれ。これは、ガード。
予想外で漏らした。
バイオかな。
赤、これがユーナレスカですか。
ねえ。
チートバグ動画面白いよね。
通さない。
はどこ、ここ。
バッカはホモ。
どこ行くねん。トロー。
これは最後ですかね。あへえ。赤、何このクリーチャー。
南金子先生が好き。
Maybe our last chance.
アヘ顔。
この遅さがじわる。
バカネブトローみたいになってるやん。
ね、ね。
ひえ。
寄生獣でも不可能そうな顔。ね、ね。
スキャグデッド。
最初に冷蔵庫ないから。
120gは大きい場合は適当な大きさに切ってください。隊長。
マカネ太郎。くそ。アルタシー。
アルタジー。
ダメじゃあは何もしなくてもほんとこうなるの。
まずミキサーにミキサーとミキサー大さじ70ハンドミキサー744リットルを入れてください。
ね、ね。
ミキサーの中にミキサーを。
次にショートケーキを
ミキサーをミキサーにかけるな。ミキサーにミキサーを合わせて。出た京子先生。耳が。
怖いな。
ミキサーとミキサーでミキサーがダブってしまった。この声が裏返るようなの面白かったな。
赤筋肉バスター。
ミキサーしかないじゃないか。
割り箸。
なんだこれわらわら。
だがしかし、
ね。
この村に
あ、ネットコアは入れ直してきたわよ。しぼん。これがクックパドちゃんですか。
やばい。
出てこんとこの小娘の首を。
ミキサーにはミキサーをぶつけるんだよ。ね、ね。
剣王とは北斗の長兄
赤ボイロとボイロを合わせて。ね。
腹筋がぶっ壊れた。
リンが喋った。
イオニック。
ジード軍団。
世紀末感ある。
お前が7つの傷の男か。
唯一面白い北斗芸じゃん。
一生どこへでもついていきます。
小娘とは
ジョイメカ。
なんだこれ。
翻訳が間違ってます。
ふざけやがって。
肩幅広いっすね。妖怪娘は好きです。
男たちの血によって人々に笑顔がよみがえった。
ヤマタノオロチかな。
これは北斗神拳。
これがターメックスですか。
中国より伝わる恐るべき暗殺剣
世紀末シアター好き。幼女強い。
北斗神拳。
北斗っていつもバグってんな。
ルア フォーントカラー00不安度 L 以下略
表面よりむしろ内部からの破壊を極意とした一撃必殺の剣
魔老人
それが今
白真の長老
貴様か俺たちの仲間をやったのは
全員無双転生してないかこれバラ
多分チートバグのせいだと思うんですが笑顔
このじいさん無双転生使ってるやん
尊重無双転生
そら笑顔になるわ
バルってるんじゃなくバリらせてん
赤ファイナルファンタジー7クライシスコアかな
消毒だ
生徒も
このかな
仲間生徒も
貴様の剣などかほども効かんわわかった
たくさん稽古する
お前はもう
おかえり
死んでいる何
百列拳は普通だった
ご飯食べてきたら世紀末になっているこの世界なら所有者も生きていける助けたな
赤ビバンみたい
貴様の攻撃などかほどにも効かぬわやり直しもうヒアナが効いてるおかわりわかるなバラ何でもキリ大読みちゃんの声がゆっくり系じゃなくなってる病んでるのは間違いないしたいけどやめろ追い打ち何度も
エクダスペシャル
赤ひどい
ご飯おかえり
終わった終わってない
キリタンおかえり
これが悪北斗の拳ですか
下えげり赤キリタンおかえりシンコクスネジョリンジョリン
お腹ペコペコだよー赤キリタン合体しよ
赤キリ
いいぞこれ
マミヤのおっぱいみたい
赤キリがはかどる
あかりちゃんキリタンキノコの山食べるかい
赤キリ本が分厚くなると
アシュラ
ねポケモンになれちゃうというすごい設定赤タケノコ派でしたらどうしますか
俺がいただこう
タケノコは斬首
キノコは
外木者じゃね
キモリ
チコリータかな
キモリは通す
タケノコはの吉田沙保里が引退したからキノコ復権赤おじいちゃんがひどいことするキノコは分かり取ってやる歌劇は
チコリータかな
コスパならアルフォー
トチコリータかな
で入れると気持ちよさそうな形だよね
ザ・エンドってね
ああ終わったエンド
でもトッポって美味しいよな唐突
ドラッグストアのレジ前特売が定位置のアルフォートくん好き
鉄道
赤エブリバーガーワはどこ
7777日
わーくそ懐かしい
だってよ
大番やめちくり。
揺さぶる、物理。
チョコアンパンのスコッ
ト。赤。竹本ピアノみたいな動きしやがって。
裁判、
合ってるけど違う、バラバラ。
ハート掴まれてる。エブリバーガーも。いいぞこれ。まだ始まってもいないじゃないか。
なるほどくんサイクロップス説。
赤これを、クロノの裁判とかぶせよう。
大監視。
くそ。
あかりちゃんのハートをつかみたい。
これはもう、お話にならない。
赤エブリバーガー派は選ばれし者。
ね、くそ。はい。黒野の裁判は有罪しかないからな。裁判
ね。赤処刑やジョネスかな。ね。
そうだよ。
エブリバーガーは上についてるゴマがうま味。あ、宇宙麻雀だ。ね。超次元麻雀来た。
麻雀ってすごいんですね。
超次元麻雀好き。ムーボーはワイないんですかね。
どの範囲にすり替えるんだ。
てめえ、この野郎いかさまだ。
ね。赤、マスコットのジャッシーが出るんですか？ぷくぷくタイも。いいぞこれ。ね。キリ、立ち上げ直したら治った。
パイを丸めるとかいう力技。
言ったもん勝ちバージョン。
ピンフ。
こんなんバレるだろ。
何が起きているんだ？
なんやこれ。
イカサマ麻雀選手権好き。
ね。
空か。
これ以上の
血を流して良いものか。
いつになく、が表情豊か。
ドラゼロは表記しなくても。
貴様の王に
前に謝るんだよ。
なんだ？行き倒れか？
執念に勝る俺の怒り。
躍動している。
怒り。
赤、ズームパンチ。
俺の命はあとどれぐらいだ。
マージャンできるの？
死んでいる。
めっちゃ飛んだ。
首パンチ。
赤、ケンシロウは波紋が使えた。
シャミ君みたいな旦那妻やめろ。
空気中にいなかったな。
エクソシストかな？
戦いは永久に決着がつかないのだ。どういうことだ。
このバグシーン
お前からユリアを奪った後、俺はユリアに与えうるべき全てのものを与え続け、
ズボンを下ろす
ユリアの気を引こうと必死だった。宝石、ドレス。
赤、この世界の住民は北斗かニコブシ食らっても言ってそう。
ユリアの心は
わらわら
動かなかった。
真にしろ。
ユリア、
足に力が入らん。
ルリア、
俺はさらなるものを探し、
わらわ
ら。そして俺の与えうるべき最高のもの、この町にサザンクロスを手に入れたんだ。俺は
ユリアって誰だよ。
これでユリアの心を動くだろうと思っていた。だが
後ろ。こっち
見ろユリア。
わらわら。
お前の町サザンクロスだ。この町のすべてがお前のものだ。
増えた？
何も考えなくていい。
もう1分経ってますよ。
赤、イリア、心臓抜き取られそう。
何これ？ロクロッシュ。
増えたんですか？
アジャローおじさんかな。
悪党が死ぬ間際に見る景色かな。
最後まで俺は
森谷
ユリアの心をつかむことができなかった。ユリアの中にはいつもお前がいたからだ。
これは飛び降りますわ。
ユリアのために築いたこの町があいつの墓標になってしまった。
何けん、ユリアさんが、あら、ユリアさんが生きている。
こんなんされたら自害しますわ。
ユリアが生きていた。
こんながい飛び降りますわ。
こんな町も権力も
この時ラオウの子も産ん
た
でるんだって。
だ虚しいだけ。俺が欲しかったものはたった一つ。
赤、マツコかな。
ドレス、
あよっと
ケンシロウ。
ビビるだわ。
赤、テリアワイン。
どうやら
ネタバレ。
こんな何人おるねん。
ここまでのようだ。
ユリアは生きていた。白真。
シイタケ。
お前の剣では死なん。
マグホッ
だがシータ
ケンシロウ。負け惜しみはそれぐらいにしなさい。負け惜しみはそれぐらいにしなさい。
器物のことを暗示していた。
シーン。
ここ好き。
心配するな。ここにいる。
いちごなんじゃねえか。
はよ行け。はよ飛べ。赤、はよ行け。
こっち来んな。後ろを。やった。
怖いな。
ためらい。
いた、わら。
これは笑い。
赤、いなくていい。
怖いな。
ホラー多いっすね。
怖いな。怖いな。
これ、あかん名前だって。
タスタカファシアか怖い。
怖いな。
いい話だったな。
継続。あ、ボンバーガールだ。
赤。
クトゥルフ神話とは来るかな。
あばばば。
ネモチートバグは、ホラー多めで、いいぞこれ、産地ゼロ。
これってホラねえか。
赤これ絶対アドマだぞ。
ホラーがいた。
なお、読んで、ホラー要素が本当にあります。
怖いな。
3は大直走。
ね。
早く消せ。
私メリーさん、今メリーさんとこたつを囲んでるの。
ネス、なんてもん見せてくれてんだ。完全にホラー。伝説の木。にしたいうなってそう。
赤あなた、あなたあなた、あなたあなた、あなたあなた、あなたあなたあなたあなたあなた。
三木原さん、三木原さん、三木原さん、三木原さん、三木原さん。こたつの中におじさんがいる。
出た。わら。ごめん、こたつの中で出てたら。
こいつ骨格どうなってんねん。右ボード。赤私あかりちゃん。今、あなたの後ろにいるの。
こんなのもあったな。あかりちゃんが俺の後に。
割った。
あかりちゃんは逆後ろに来て。いるはずもないわ、たくん。おっす。あかりちゃんが後ろにいるとかご褒美じゃないか。
やったぜ。
私メリーさん。あかりちゃんに後ろを取られたわ。深く。
赤後ろに行ったら耳に息吹きかけます。
そうゆえに。
じゃあ私はあかりちゃんの後ろに回ってクワクワ。あふん。
ご褒美すぎて冥界行きそう。
赤、メリーさんが後ろ、私が前だ。
怖いな。
怖い。あかりちゃん中の理度高そうですね。
看板です。赤、これ。
怖いな。
な、ぞ、の、ば、し、よ。
赤これが錬磨事変ですか。
ね。
洋館怖かった。デビ。この技能兄さん。
赤レビトーラーかな。
ああ、ぎっくり腰だいぶ良くなってきた。
います M。今お出かけから帰って、イカ略。
おかわり。
良くなってきたのかよかったよかった。赤、ポケモンパロのホラーとかありそう。
おはよ
う、兄貴おかえり。金帰った。
赤おきゃいり仕事兄貴。
おはよ
う、兄貴。
おはよそういやポケモン初期にポケモンの同人誌が出たってニュースに出てたな。
怖いな。
赤、ドラえもん同人誌。ノドグロが出てきた。
通常感度の3。
モンスターしかいないん。赤黒い。
通さない。
北斗神拳でも撃たれたかな。
This may be our last chance.
光る中毒者かな。おっぱいプルンプルン。
赤こんなおピー触りたくない。
これがま。
これは生きてますね。
荒ぶるおっぱい。
バステと髪かな。
こんなプルンプルンは嫌だ。
なんだこりゃ。赤マライアだった。
ニュー、アナ、X。さっさと消えてほしいっすね。
そんなプルスが相当閣下もお怒りになる。これの PAS さんは見た気がする。
教習所マックス。
自動車教習所足す頭がいい運転。カオス。
枕とは赤、プルルートはプルンプルン。
水を。
教習所でしょ。
なんだ？
こいついつもバグってんな。
行き倒れか？ジードかもしれん。
さあ、水でも飲んでいってくだされ。
わかった。
水。
悪き流れ。 枕営業に決まってるだろう。
愛を取り戻せ。
愛をください。
愛でも学んで。
赤、車の免許の引っ掛け問題ってなんであんなにひねくれてるの？愛
が足りないぜ。
くそ。
よ、サイー。
赤、ユーロビートかな。でか。役がわからないよ。霧、たくさんカンカン叩くの好き。プルルートはプルンプルンしないん。
変身
しないと。
犯人やないか。
現場で空き巣をしていたって。
赤西川隆今日の格好をした島村うずき思い出した。
自供。今最初にすげえこと言ったぞ。お前じゃい。
自白してて。くそ。どうやら捕まりたいらしい。出頭かな？
自供したじゃん。
どこがね
ー。疑惑をつ。
無能。
残り時間20分になりました。赤間抜けは見つかったようだぜ。ね。ね。なんか。
軽い。なんか、わらわら。
なんやこれ。
これはしていい。わら。
小学生みてえなこと言ってんなおい。
わら。
赤、なんで髪がなくなったの？
じゃあこうしましょう。
Try that move. One more time.
Finally, things were starting to look up.
これすご。ペーペロ。
赤、青鬼かな？
ね。
You know amateur. Who you play for?
The Xanarkanabes.
What did you say again?
こんにちは。
I meant, forget that. I got too close to sin and my head's all foggy like.
言葉が。
So I don't know where this place is, or even where I came from.
Sin's toxin got to you, but you're still alive. Praise be to Yevon.
ディズニーかな？
All right, back to practice. I'm Waka, coach and captain of the Besaid Aurochs, brother. What? You hungry? Okay, back to the village. I'll get you something.
赤、おじいちゃん言ってら。もう妖怪みたいだな。
クリーチャーすぎる。おじいちゃん無理しないでね。
おじいちゃん気をつけてね。
飯田くんがマシに見えたね。
赤、カレー飯も買ってきてね。
じいちゃん兄貴へ交換テラ。
Previously on the Angry Video Game
お
Nerd.
じいちゃん車に気をつけてね。
Gundam Wing Endless Duel, or its official title, Shin Kido Senki Gundam Wing Endless Duel, is one of the best Super Famicom games that stayed in Japan, and certainly one of the best 16-bit fighting games of its era. Why is that? It's the little things. Well, actually to start with, it's the big, huge, bright, colorful things right in front of your face. You fight as a giant mech, or mobile suit as the Gundam universe refers to it, and yeah, this game looks frickin' spectacular. And it's not just the quality pixel art and polished animation, it's the speed and the frame rate. Despite the sheer amount of stuff going on, this game is lightning fast. But what really pushes Gundam Wing Endless Duel over the top are the little things that still make it feel like you're fighting as a giant ass-kicking robot rather than just some guy. And that's because of the excellent sound design, as well as the subtle shake of the camera perspective to imply the massive weight of these mobile suits. Some fighting games, especially modern games, tend to get a little carried away with the camera shake thing. It can get real annoying real quick. But here, it's pitch perfect. The game is able to maintain a sense of chaos while keeping the fights focused enough so they aren't just one big random mess. So yeah, combine the speed, the frame rate, the pixel art, the sound design, and the little touches done just right, and you have yourself a quality fighting game. As for the combat itself, I guess it's easy to expect your typical Street Fighter clone, and in some ways it is. This does play like a Street Fighter style game along the lines of Street Fighter 2 Alpha more than anything else. That's definitely not a bad thing. It's far from generic. You got combos, air dashing, double air dashing, in fact lots of mid-air stuff, which is really cool. Juggling, projectile weapons, and you can actually attack your opponent while they're down. You don't see that too often in fighting games back then. There's 10 fighters to choose from, and of course everyone is based on the Gundam Wing anime, which I'm not all that familiar with. There's some distinct differences in the fighters, but nothing out of the ordinary. I do like the heavy arms character who's just laden with weaponry. That's badass. The quicker fighters like Tall Geese are able to take advantage of the game's vertical scrolling, so that's pretty cool. There is of course a versus mode and a story mode. Beat the story mode and you unlock a hard mode and another character to use in multiplayer versus. Of course, when talking about Gundam Wing, you have to mention Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Fighting Edition, and why is that? Because that was a North American exclusive game that came 6 months earlier. And yeah, it looks pretty familiar, doesn't it? It was made by the same developer, Natsume, and it serves more or less as a makeshift prototype for Endless Duel, but there's fewer characters to choose from, the fighting is a little less varied. Really, if anything, Endless Duel plays more like a polished sequel to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Fighting Edition, just, you know, if they completely switch TV shows. Anyway, yeah, if you're into fighting games, or even if you're not, Gundam Wing Endless Duel is well worth playing today. If I had to make a list of the 10 or 12 best Japan-only games that never made it overseas, this would definitely be on there. The problem is that the cartridge is, of course, wildly expensive, so once again, it's flash cartridges to the rescue. So yeah, as usual, any way you're able to play this game, highest recommendation for Endless Duel. Sega drunk. The past couple Genesis reviews I've done have been Konami games, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Hyperstone Heist, which is a good enough game, but not really worth playing today since it's just a
Hello, and welcome to Did You Know Gaming Extra. Today we're looking at interesting and exciting uses of console hardware. Pushing a console to its limits is something many game developers strive to do. With the Game Boy Advance being a primarily 2D gaming handheld, the desire to push the device and create 3D games was an understandable one. Today we're looking at interesting and exciting uses of console hardware. Pushing a console to its limits is something many game developers strive to do. With the Game Boy Advance being a primarily 2D gaming handheld, the desire to push the device and create 3D games was an understandable one. Raylight Games, an Italian studio, was one of the more prominent 3D developers for the GBA, and created their own 3D engine for the handheld with impressive results. They created 2 demos showing the rendering capabilities of their Blue Rose's engine, one by recreating a similar area to the hangar from Metal Gear Solid, and another of a playable demo for Resident Evil 2. This Resident Evil demo put players in control of Leon during the opening moments of the full original PlayStation release. The demo also includes a small, non-playable snippet showing a shot from Street Fighter X after completion. While none of the games were finished or officially endorsed by their original rights holders, these demos were created to show off the light footprint and power of Raylight's Blue Rose's engine. Raylight tried to pitch the game to Capcom officially, but it was turned down, in part because the Game Boy Advance was ending its relevancy, but also because Capcom saw issue with a mature game for the system. Normally, a game is built with a console's limitations in mind, and is optimized and designed to work within the console's hardware capabilities. In some instances, however, developers get a chance to push beyond these limitations. Ready at dawn, the developers of God of War Chains of Olympus on the Sony PSP repeatedly requested Sony adjust the clock speed of the PSP's processor. Even though Ready at Dawn had created a version of the game that operated at the system's 222 MHz, this clock speed could be raised through a firmware update, and the extra power could be utilized in-game. Sony released a firmware upgrade which increased the 222 clock speed to 333 MHz, allowing for more realistic blood, lighting, and shadows, as well as an improvement to enemy intelligence. While the update to the console improved the hardware capabilities, it did introduce a noticeable decrease in battery life. Utilizing console hardware to do something other than playing games is also a pretty common occurrence, and even happens outside of game development. The Brook House Immigration Removal Centre in West Sussex in the United Kingdom is a holding location for those awaiting deportation to their home countries, usually after breaking British law. The facility allows inmates to have a PlayStation 1, as the hardware is not capable of connecting to the internet. One man was caught with several parts of a PlayStation, which the staff ultimately confiscated. He had been using the internal motor of the PlayStation console, along with some of its casing, to create his own crude tattoo inking gun, a machine he had been using with other inmates. While it does seem a little outlandish, the act is apparently not uncommon, as a number of Nintendo 64 Rumble Pack motors have also been used for this exact same purpose. Another case of hardware repurposing takes the form of a breathalyzer built into an NES cartridge. Created by Batsley Adams and friends over a few hours, the group used an alcohol sensor, some magic with an NES communications device, and homebrew software to create a full game to go with it. Drunken NES is a simple game that requires the player to blow into the NES cartridge, or breathalyzer, where it will then measure you on 6 levels of slosh. This is either sober, getting started, buzzed, tipsy, drunk, or wasted. Depending on where they land, the player will also get a short animation appropriate to their rank and a score. Adams said, "The thing is actually pretty accurate provided you didn't have a drink in the past 3 minutes. We all did a lot of drinking for science. It was fun having Excel open, collecting data. As we all know, what goes in must come out the other end." This next story focuses on J.J. Hendrix's design for a functional urinal made out of approximately 40 Super Nintendo game cartridges. Having placed the original up on Craigslist for the price of $499, Hendrix has since published instructions on how to construct one of these for yourself. However, it will set you back $200 to $250, not including the video games, as well as 8 hours of your life. It's important to add here that upon painfully close inspection, the cartridges used were either already broken, LJN games, or Madden, hopefully. And now it's time for this episode's random piece of trivia. We're looking back to the movie tie-in game Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, released in 1991 on the NES. After the player loses their final life before the game over screen loads in, pressing down, left, A and B will cause a message to pop up that reads, "Rob loves Sandy." It's assumed this message was included by Rob Harris, a programmer who worked on the game. That's all for today, but we hope you enjoyed yourselves. If you want to catch more trivia, check out one of the 2 videos up on screen. Don't forget to give us a like, and if you haven't yet, why not subscribe to see all of our videos as they go live. Did you know? Although the DS was very profitable for Nintendo, the system's games are one of the most pirated products in gaming history. In 2010, Japan's Computer Entertainment Suppliers Association published a list of Japan's most pirated DS games. CESA's findings showed that the 20 best-selling DS games were downloaded almost 20 million times collectively in Japan. Pokemon Platinum was illegally downloaded almost 2.1 million times, a figure that that nearly matched the game's 2.7 million regional sales. Most of this piracy can be attributed to flash cartridges such as the R4, which allowed users to play DS ROM files using a micro SD card. Nintendo took measures to combat piracy on their platforms, but with limited success. In 2008, Nintendo teamed up with 54 other video game companies to take legal action to halt sales of R4 units. Their lawsuit used Japan's unfair competition prevention law and asked that all companies involved with the R4s to stop importing, selling, and advertising the devices. Unfortunately, Nintendo's actions had little effect, and consumers continued to buy R4 devices online.
NV1 was based on Saturn hardware. While it was powerful, it was unorthodox and difficult to develop games with. Sega gave Nvidia a chance, demanding they produce a working prototype of their hardware. When Nvidia's Saturn V08 chip returned a blank screen during the presentation,
Power Stone 好きだったな。
まさか我の動画が出てくるとは。
しかし、関節のパーツのチョイスをちょくちょくミスる模様。バンダへ。
なんだ
このおっさん。
赤、バンダイはドジっ子。
Big yikes. 89.
赤、この動画終わったらネプテューヌするか。
You getting fucked over? Yeah, I don't want that. I don't want 89. I do not want to see that. What is this? Oh my god, dude.
RTA の神様に愛されなかったな。
I'm gonna run out of potions, dude.
海外のビーム兄貴。赤、そのうちしたいね。
恥ずかしくないのか。
お前ファミコンかな。草。
What?
外国
I'm gonna actually run out of potions.
兄貴のルシファーよりやばいっすね。
What?
お祈りが足りないんですよ。
ビーム兄貴はもっと悲惨な表情してそう。
くそ。赤、サンデーモデリングとツールで、ファイナルファンタジー7っぽいゲーム作りたいな。
I have one more. I'm out of fucking MP?
だんだん動き強くなってて。お祈りした、お布施。
顔わらわら。
失敗率は 0.48x、0.48x、0.48x、最終的に9以下略。プレイヤーがリミットブレイクしそう。
Oh my god! This has to work. This has to work or the run's fucked. No, dude! You fucking idiot!
赤かシアニキーってら。
紅茶も買ってこようかな。くそ。
赤あかりちゃんはお小水してくる。
紅茶はどこのメーカーがおすすめですか？こんなんじゃ記録にならないよ。
ジョボテラ
ねえ、そうね、あかりちゃん。
今なら宝くじ当たるんじゃない？
I can't believe that.
赤、紅茶はコチョンがおすすめ。
I have to, okay, run's over.
紅茶はルピシアで勝ってる。
Run is over. But, I wanna see if this will...
イディオット。
席を立つ。
万宝天ってのも美味しいらしいね。
くそ。
ね。
くそ。
ね、ほら、これの紅茶を意味な。夕食の買い出しから帰宅。今日は節分でしたね、そういえば。
Okay. Alright, chat. Let's do some calculations here. Chance of bio is what? 48%? Okay. We did that, I believe, 12 times. 12 times! What is the probability of that? Dude, that is bullshit. That is bullshit, man. Oh my god. Okay, this has to be a clip. I don't think you guys realize how stupid this is. This is so fucking dumb, dude. You have no idea how unlucky that is. You don't.
トッポの0。999。
娯楽超大作。完成。
もう許さない。
ドラマチックアドベンチャー。
12回。
桜大戦。
12回。
セガサターン。
それでは続きまして、ゆっくりの桜大戦1分に収まった試しがない
赤、
1分間
さっき詰まって溢れそうになって焦ったぞ。
クソだの
明治の文明開化より50年余り、
昔、
着物に身を包む人々と背広を込む人々が混在し、人力車と蒸気自動車、謎の化け物などが行き交う、近代化と西洋化の過渡期にある、帝都東京。季節は春。桜の花びらが優雅に舞い散る中、人々は花見のひとときを楽しんでいましたが、飛び立つ煙とともに、
長いままだと食べにくいからカットしましょうね。
人々が逃げ惑う中、襲いかかる怪物を、人たちに切って捨てる女の子。一方、帝国歌劇団、花組隊長の任を受けた、帝国海軍、
ゲームやは面白い
の
よね。
大神一郎。
では、上野公園に向かいたまえ。
花見の準備だ。
君の手にかかっている。
桜が満開の上野公園で、大神を迎えてくれたのは、袴姿の女の子でした。桜の案内のもと、彼が向かった先は、帝国歌劇団の舞台として有名な、銀座の大帝国劇場。大神の初任務は、
大臣とか UFO の
入場客の切符を切るもぎり。
酒が。
俺の任務は、秘密部隊の隊長じゃなかったのか。
大神は大いに
赤ゲームやわなんて物があるのに。
隠れ蓑に過ぎず、劇場は悪の組織、クロノス会に立ち向かう秘密部隊、帝国歌劇団の総本部でした。
帝国歌劇団、
を操れるのは今のところ
赤、それはガビルでしょ。
もぎりお兄ちゃんにも霊力がありたくてきつかったな。花組隊員たちとの結びつきを深めながら、大神は部隊隊長として
あら、最後の動画じゃなかったのね、嬉しい。
俺たちの1996年 バラ組は2からだっけ。 発売。販売開発はセガエンタープライゼス。
アイリスは
赤バラ組がバラ説
あるよう
に見えたぞ。
ですが、ヒロイさんはインタビューで60万本程度
手がほどいない男主人公ってすごいと思う。
それでは続きまして、
声不完結演やりたくて使いました。
リクエスト作品を紹介
藤
するコ
島康
ーナーです。
介は神。
ゲームやわは、
これってアニメ化もしたんだよね。
皆さんのリクエストを元に取り上げるゲームを決めております。当動画は年23回ですので、取り上げられる作品の数には、おのずと上限がありますが、
女の子しか使うことができないって便利な設定よね。
一つでも多くのご要望にお答えしたいと思っています。グランディア。ドラクエや
ミスド
FF
さんは
を要する
反面教
プレイステー
師。
ションに対抗すべく、セガのバックアップのもと、ゲームアーツが開発した、セガサターンで発
サムソン
売されたロ
バラ族
ールプレイングゲーム。
サブ
一流の冒険者を目指す主人公が、 見学に出かけた遺跡で、謎の女性から導きを受けたことをきっかけとして、幼馴染と共に、新大陸を目指して旅立つ冒険活劇です。
赤グリリバとかも、もう50近いでしょ。
2D アニメによる豊かなキャラクター表現、特徴的な戦闘システムなどが魅力とのことです。
グランディアのブルクイに
買ったがあれば、ぜひ実際にプレイをした上で、
前期の千秋コスしてたのも懐かしい。
取り上げてほしいと思われる方は、
ゲームアーツって、ゲグザーで有名な
龍が如くゼロ、誓いの場所。以前、龍が如くを取り上げましたが、
旦那さんが40くらいだっけか。
一馬や、真島五郎の物語を描いた作品です。
女装した男しか操縦できない、ロボットとかないっすかね。
の真っ只中にあった1988年、龍の伝説は、ここから始まった。脚本を担当したのは、最近話題となっている、木村拓哉さん主演のジャッジアイズでも脚本を手掛けた、古田剛さんです。取り上げてほしいと思われる方は、ぜひコメントをお寄せください。
真島の兄さん
の内容について掘り下げていきましょう。
女装男にしか反応しない子は、
本年もよろしくお願いいたします。今回はまず、桜大戦誕生の一冊から紐解いてみたいと思います。広い王子さんが設立したレッドカンパニーは、ゲームやアニメーションなどの企画制作を行っている会社です。
わがまますりないそのロボット。
桜大戦は、当初桜という企画名で、ウォーシミュレーションゲームの大戦略や、各ユニットに個性付けがなされ、戦闘中に会話が交わされる、ファイアーエムブレムから着想を得て、
ジャッジアイズの続編まだ時間かかりそうですかね。
しかし、様々な
グランディアさんの泥沼制作事情の話。
理解が得られることはなく、桜企画は、しばらく
香織悟は今何やってんの？
ことになりました。
主人公だけは女装しなくても動くんでしょ。
当時のセガの副社長、入間尻正一郎さんから、20年持つキャラクターゲームを作りたいと依頼を受けたことで、寝かされていた企画に、
グランディアには色濃いエンドなしだったな。
当時、広井さんは防南国諸島に旅行に出かけていましたが、説得のため、入間尻さんもその後を追って、はるばる遠い異国の地に足を運びました。入間尻さんは元ホンダの副社長で、広井さんにとっては遠い雲の上の存在。果たして、
グランディア1って主人公をやりまくったんだろうな。
という懸念が、広井さんの中にはあったそうです。
入間尻ってすごい名字だな。
たくさんの付き人がいる中で、プールを覗き込んでいた入間尻さんの背中を押し、プールの中に突き落としました。これで、もし入ったり混じったりしろ。この話はなかったことにしよう。
福岡の方に知り合いには、入間尻さんはいる。
このプールはやっぱり深いなぁなどと言って、全く腹を立てる様子もなく、広井さんはその大きな土曜に感激し、その場で、入間尻さんの申し出を受けることを決断したそうです。
古田金木村拓哉とかいう動画でビーム打ちまくってた気がする。
登場人物は全員男性でしたが、その頃ブームとなっていた恋愛ゲームを意識し、女性キャラが加えられていくことになったとのことです。もともとあった桜という企画に、恋愛シミュレーションと、キャラクターゲームというコンセプトが組み合わさって、桜大戦の開発が進められていくことになりました。当初、桜大戦の舞台設定は、昭和の戦争直後の闇市があるような土地柄で、そこで女の子たちが舞台を作っていく物語だったと広井さんは語っています。しかし、ゲームに華やかさを求める中で、
というだけでネタになるゲーム。こういうのいいかも。
広いは普通、堺はサイコパス。幼少時代、浅草に住んでいた広井さんは、松竹歌劇団が舞台を行っていた国際劇場によく足を運んでいたそうです。広井さんの叔母は、松竹歌劇団の第一期生でした。そういった背景がある中で、広井さんは、本作で音楽を手掛けた田中康平さんに、ミュージカルをやりたいと話しました。田中さんはそれに対し、ゲームでやればいいじゃないかと答えたそうです。ミュージカルを着想のベースとしている以上、ゲームに華やかさを求めるという考え方は、広井さんにとって、至極当然のことだったのだと思います。ところが、当初開発を担当していた、ある開発会社が作っていた桜大戦を、広井さんが確認したところ、華やかさとは遠くかけ離れた、とても地味なゲームだったそうです。とはいえ、作り直すことになれば、システム開発から、
ほとんどゼロベースでやり直すことになり、
オープニングだけで億単位かかったんだっけ。
発売延期は必至の状況です。どうしてもダメかと遠入り混じりさんに対し、ヒロイさんは、これでは売れませんと答えたそうです。もちろん、発売延期はないに越したことはありませんが、マリオの生みの親、宮本茂さんは、次のようなニュアンスのことを語っています。
赤。
発売が
ちょっとだけエフェクトがある。
が立てば、いつか許してもらえるかもしれませんが、妥協して発売したつまらないゲームは、永遠につまらないままです。そして、開発はセガに引き継がれ、桜大戦はその後もシリーズ化され、
妹とくっつけるスルグ作ろう。
250万本を売り上げ、2018年、新桜大戦のプロジェクトが発表され、
今からでもアイリスでしっこってどう
20
ぞ。
年続くキャラクターゲームという男たちの夢とロマンがもうすぐ実現しようとしています。
はい、永遠に通してもらえないからな。
今回も3つのテーマに分け
ド
てお
ラクエ5
話しいたし
両
ます。
言うた。
最初のテーマはこちら。
サンキューしげる。
テーマ1、桜大戦の魔法。
キリ、ガロ家のデイリー終わったら放送やります。
というコ
準備
ンセプト
完了。
で作られた以上、まずは、
赤そのセリフがあかりちゃんに刺さるぞ
登場人物を好きになってもらう必要があります。好きになってもらうには、きっかけや
10年以上延期したゲームは面白いんだ。
特別な感情を引き出すには、キャラクターや
赤キリ
ゲーム
タンガンバ
と真剣に向き合ってもらうことが重要になります。ゲーム最序盤、第1話における、桜のセリフ。
米田支配人はこうおっしゃいました。
やったぜ。
キリタン隊期待機。
花組の隊長を務める人は、
キリタン待ってますよ。
この劇場を、そして、ここでの暮らしを愛してくれる人でなければ、
ハーレムなのに嫌われない大臣。
このキャラが素敵だと思う。私からもお願いがあります。この劇場を、
ベニランなんかの方が可愛く思えてきた。
好きになってください。そして、私たちの隊長として、一緒に戦ってください。
赤。
申し訳ない。
が最初のシナリオを書き直したゲームは NG。
ゲーム序盤でプレイヤーに伝えるための、まさ
そうじゃないけど大臣。
20分になりました。キリガンオペなんて後回しでいいんだよ。手のひらドリル。
狼は劇団の真の使命を知り、初戦闘を経て、初めての
残り2話、
公演に加わることになります。
ハンナーメキを入れたのはすごいと思う。
大切な儀式。
キリタンの放送ってどこで見れるの？
そこに笑顔で加わる大神。本作は気をてらうことなく、
ルキがギャルゲーに
僕は高校の頃からコーランが好きでした。
感情の起伏を生じさせ
赤
ていると
キリタンに
思います
ドリル。つけたい。
もぎりの仕事を終え、落胆している大神に投げかけられる
主人公のライバルポジの子がスコだったな。
桜の訴えと励まし
いい。
落胆していたからこそ、このカーテンコールにおける大神の笑顔は、より印象的なものになっているのではないでしょうか。
スレードキリタン。
そして第3話で、
勝利の
そこで
坊主とは
机に突っ伏して眠っている、コーランを抱っかかれた時に、思ったよりも軽いと大神がつぶやくシーン。後部を操る隊員たちも、やっぱり普通の女の子なんだな。花組の隊員たちは、普段は劇団のスターで、人々の憧れの存在であると同時に、実際は普通の女の子。落ち込むこともあれば、喧嘩もする、彼女たちの素顔。本作における、夜の見回りなどの探索パートは、そんな彼女たちの素顔を垣間見ることのできる機会です。探索パートでは、劇場の館内を自由に巡ることができますが、訪れることのできる部屋の数は、あらかじめ上限が決まっている場合も多く、いつどこで何が起こるかは、
オワボンって打つ展開の後のあれで有名なんだって。
二
人は桜色。
制限があるからこそ、
赤、
限られた貴重な機会をものにせねばという気持ちが出来上がってきます。
お前も家族だ。
私に隙はない
宇宙の女の子を探す。プロマイドを購入する。事務局にいる女の子たちの噂話を聞く。あるいは、とりあえず
やったことないから CM のあれしかわからん。
限られた時間を何に費やすかは、
メインヒロインにすると、
もちろんプレイヤーの自由です
強いマ
が、
リアーネキス
そこには、どこで何が起こるかわからないからこその、可能性
回
を探る
数に制限
楽しみも加味されています。その結果、ぬいぐるみを探しているアイリスにばったりと遭遇したり、
赤私もフォローしと
夜中に一人舞台で稽
こ
古している桜を偶然見かけたりと、
体が
プレイヤー
勝手に。
の自発性に委ねつつ、あくまでも
身体が勝手にシャワー室に。
様々な彼女たちの素顔を発見していくことになります。そして
スネグラチ
本
かスネ
作の大き
グラチか
な特徴
と教えてくれたマリアさん。
リップスと呼ばれる時
選
間制
択肢に
限付きの
時間を設ける
選択。
のもいいアイデア。
大神にとっての良き相談相手である、
アイリス
あ
で抜く
やめさんのセリフ。
CM のイメージが強い。
の判断力が必要よ。大丈夫よ。
マリア。
いつもの自分を偽らない大神君ならばね。本作の選択肢は、時間制限があることによって、プレイヤーは意識を集中しながら、懸命に選択肢から一つを選ぶことになり、
続きが見たい方は URL 省略 YouTube.com を以下
様々な感情が芽生えることになります。喜んでもらえてよかった。
こいつの体いつも勝手に動いてんな。
あんなこと言わなきゃよかった。
ゴミフォローしたくれ。
になれんとみたい。その変化した形によって、
ありがとうございました。
行動を表すという仕組みになっています。これは本当に素晴らしいアイデアで、操作の簡略化や、
ありがとうございました。
操作に繋がっているだけでなく、もし仮に説明書を一切読まずにプレイをして、突然カーソルが画面に現れても、カーソルを動かしているうちに、その形の変化で、それが何を意味しているのかが、誰でも一目で理解できるようになっています。つまり、横井軍平さんがお話し